Chapter 1430. P.S. After the update at 20 o'clock tonight, nearly 200 people have contributed monthly votes to Sloth. I'm ashamed. I don't know how to thank him. Now Swordsman is ranked 10th on the monthly votes list. No matter what happens after 12 o'clock, Sloth will remember that he reached this position with your help. The result is not important. What's important is your support. There are too many names, I can't thank them all, but please believe me, I can see every one of you. With your support, Swordsman can be where he is today. The last hour or two is the world of data. We won't fight for it. Sloth has achieved his goal. Thank you, I won't pursue more updates. I'll focus more on quality. There's still a long time, let's take it slow. At the start, the two true monarchs still had some misgivings. But slowly, under the impudence of the other three, they gradually let go of the so-called hierarchy and the rules of the sect, becoming unrestrained and unrestrained. In fact, in a sense, this was the true meaning of being carefree, but in this world of cultivation, when you faced elders who were several realms higher than you, how many could do this? After a few rounds of drinking, another uninvited guest came. It was the first elder of Taishian Zhonghuang, the chief young god Xian. This table became more and more lively. Without any contact, one would think that these two young gods in power were so serious and unapproachable. When one really got to know them, they were just two ordinary old men, the same vulgar jokes, the same bickering. But this time, the topic began to slowly shift to the general trend of the changes in the universe. They talked about the conflict between Taoists and Buddhists, the realm war, the chasm between the sects, the Zhou Xian's drawbacks, the heaven's choice, and of course, some of the things that the Five Rings had displayed in this war. This was beneficial to everyone. What was in sight? The vision of these two old monsters, who were almost 8,000 years old together, was in sight. The heaven's choice was big but not good, and its structure was loose. Zhou Xian was conservative and muddling along. The Five Rings were rash and fanning the flames. The Taoists were idle and empty, and the Buddhists were unscrupulous. They were all laughing at them. There were young gods talking and laughing, and they were all Zhenjuan. Finally, when they talked about the chessboard of heaven and earth, Xian said seriously, white brows. I've decided to give up the yellow in Taishian's round, and use all the elites of Taishian to mix with you, Xiao Yao Yu, and fight to the death in this round. Only in this way would Zhou Xian's luck not go downhill. The people's hearts are still there, and their fighting spirit is still there. What do you think? Whitebrow laughed. Old man, you finally understand. I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time. You and I have lived for almost 8,000 years, but we are not as clear as the little guys down there. The fact is, even if I, Xiao Yaoyu, survived this round and had a rising star like Xiao Yiqing Xian, I still wouldn't be able to face a serious heaven's choice. Failure in the next round is inevitable because we don't even have enough manpower. However, if you and I join forces, we will have a strong army. The next round will be very interesting to watch. Old man, when was the last time you and I worked together to defeat an enemy? Can your old body still hold up? Don't puff yourself up at your own cost. Old man Xian snorted. This old man can't do anything else, but dragging people along is no problem at all. 2, 3 young gods of heaven's choice. I can drag them along until the end of time. Our two clans are just the beginning. My intention is to drag Qingwei and Yuanshi into the game. Everyone can forget about the future games. Just take this round as the last one. In this way, Zhou Xian will have a reason to continue existing. Whitebrow nodded. That's right. Even Bitter Zen Temple. If we continue to compete game after game, how can we compare to Heaven's Choice in terms of the number of cultivators? Only by joining forces and sending Heaven's Choice to continuous failure can we intensify the conflict between them and have the possibility of retreating. Otherwise, like now, if they can see the dawn of victory, they can always maintain this fragile balance. If this goes on, when will it end? Victory, continuous victory, boosts their morale. As long as we win the next round, I'm afraid some of those clans won't be able to sit still. This was a very brilliant strategy that was far better than just trying his luck passively. In the continuous victory, they would slowly unite those cultivators who were unwilling to lose and form a force of inertia. Heaven's choice was actually very uncomfortable outside. Every time they failed, there would be a large number of cultivators who couldn't participate in the battle. When such a group of people exceeded a certain number, it was inevitable that conflicts would erupt. Taoist Xian drank a mouthful of wine. In the next game, it will be Heaven's Choice's turn to make a move. We have to defeat them to have the possibility of condensing Zhou Xian's will. Therefore, I was thinking that among the cultivators who will participate in the competition, we should choose those who have better skills. Since we can't just rely on our two sects, why don't we ask the Bitter Zen Temple for reinforcements? Whitebrow nodded. Good idea. Whitebrow, don't care about the so-called face. I want to see if Bitter Zen Temple can really put down their prejudice for Zhou Xian. As the two talked, they decided on their future strategy. As they talked, something seemed to be wrong. It turned out that in their plan, the two five-ring juniors who had never shown any fear were surprisingly quiet. One was asking for pointers in the Tao of Pills with perfected Lord Dijia, and the other was whispering to perfected Lord Xiaojia. Whitebrow glared. You two are so cunning. We old people are here racking our brains for Zhou Xian, but you two are hiding far away. One is asking for pills, the other is asking for beauties, and you're acting like there's nothing going on. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. The old people use their brains, while the young people use their hands. Isn't every war like this? With you two old people here, why should we worry about this? We're all good kids who are wholeheartedly seeking the Tao. How can we compare to the two old seniors? Chain of Ghosts. Qing Xian laughed dryly. Respecting one's teacher is the basic etiquette of us cultivators. What the two seniors are discussing is an important matter of the Zhou immortal sect. This matter concerns the movements of the entire sect and is of great importance. Us youngsters are narrow-shouldered and will only listen to orders. Old man Xian also spoke. How about this? Each of you come up with an idea. No one is allowed to leave it out. It has to be a decent idea. The two of you led thousands of reinforcements back from thousands of miles away. You even came into contact with the Buddha sections. How dare you say that you don't have experience? Both of you are full of evil tricks, and your brains are full of vicious thoughts. Are you pretending to be pure people here? Big and Small Jaw laughed. They laughed at the two fellows for pushing the blame away. They didn't understand that this was actually an expression of seeing through the nature of war. They weren't pretending to be virtuous, but they no longer had the ambition to do so. They would rather return to the state of being ordered around as small soldiers than to lead the so-called army. This was a change in mentality. It was difficult for outsiders to understand. Only those who had personally led the army would understand the profoundness of it. The so-called besieging of a city meant that you had to first walk in, and then be able to come out. That was the real breaking of the wall. If you kept wandering outside the city, how could you have such a deep understanding? The elders had no choice but to force them. The two of them looked at each other, and Qing Xian spoke first. In my opinion, if we want to use the fifth board as the focal point of the battle, then the appropriate battle formation must be clear. The immortal realm of the primordial spirit must be stable. Don't ask for merit, just ask for no mistakes. It must be able to withstand the test of time. He had to endure until the next two rounds were decided, and then decide who was the winner. The mortal realm of the Yuanying realm must learn battle formations. Since it will be this group of people fighting the mortal realm in the future, then we should train a few people who are good at formations to coordinate on the spot instead of just relying on the commander's distant view. In this kind of confrontation between large armies, it's impossible to organize tactics accurately without understanding the situation. Finally, in the demonic realm, we have Immortal Xiao Jia's superb chess skills and a person who is born with a good eye. You can just throw him in wherever is dangerous and important. I can guarantee that Candide Haz won't disappoint you. Chapter 1431. P.S. It's a new month, but Old Fallen has to wither for a period of time. I'm ashamed. I'll update 3 times a day, and I'll add one more depending on the situation. Please give me time to sort out my thoughts. This debt, it's getting bigger and bigger. Quality is king. This is what Old Fallen doesn't want to give up, and it's also what you guys really need. Then, I'll wait for the day when I rise again. Finally, I'd like to thank my friends again for pushing Old Fallen forward in the last half an hour. Orange Fruit, Wenwu, Yu Xiaoyao, Daoist Master Xiao, Yunkai, Stephen, Brother Ho, 3ZZZZ, and so on. There are too many. Thank you for your support. Have a good read. Tonghalu? Which one? Kawa asked the question on everyone's mind. Regardless of Lu Xiaoyi's threatening glance, Qing Xian did not hesitate to expose Lu Xiaoyi's past. He could see that with this person, you should take advantage of him whenever you can. If there was any dirty water, you should seize the opportunity to splash it. If it was too late, it would mean that this guy was disgusting you. He should not be soft-hearted and learn from the soft-hearted woman. Hence, after his explanation, everyone looked at him in surprise. As expected, swordsmen had a bloodthirsty tendency. However, as their cultivation level increased, some people would hide this tendency deeply, but the root of it would not change. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. How many years had it been since he had last explained this matter? Even though he knew it was futile, he still defended himself habitually. I'm scared of blood. Seeing everyone's uniform expression, the meaning was obvious. Do you think we're all idiots? Hence, he shut his mouth decisively. White brows did not let him off. Qing Xian has finished, but you haven't. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He really had nothing to say. He came here because he was a brick, and he would move wherever he was needed. He never thought of playing a key role. He just wanted to do his best, just like the thousands of ordinary cultivators in Zhou Xian. He did not want to be a leader. That was too tiring. He had to consider all aspects, the combination of martial arts, the feelings of the people, judging the situation, the balance of power, resolving disputes, and so on. It was even more tiring than being a parent. He would do it all again, if he had nothing better to do. Things like this should be left to those who have the ambition to do it. What he needed to do was to fight based on his instincts. He had to say something else, otherwise the two old men wouldn't let him off. In my opinion, the heaven's chosen ones are not fools. If they keep using Taoism to clear one stage and Buddhism to clear another, maybe they will still use Taoism next time? This was purely bickering because he could not think of any better suggestion than Qing Xian. Therefore, he purposely picked a quarrel. Didn't you say that it should be the Heaven's Choice Buddha lineage's turn to make a move for the stage? What if Heaven's Choice changed its tactics? It was no secret that Heaven's Choice's attack group was divided into two groups. Even their gathering camps in outer space were located in different airspace. Moreover, there were never any mixed groups of Taoists and Buddhists. They were either Taoists or monks. There were no exceptions. Heaven's Choice's attack style was to alternate between Taoism and Buddhism, regardless of whether they won or lost. Therefore, in the previous chess game, Xiao Yaoyu defeated the Taoists. Therefore, it should be the monks' turn next. This was a normal rotation. That was why old man Xian Xian said that they should find some cultivators who were proficient in dealing with Buddhism. Everyone's cultivation direction was different. Even within the same mountain sect, there were many different directions. Some focused on the internal confrontation of Taoism, some focused on balanced development, and some focused on Buddhism. Previously, the number of people in the Carefree Wanderer was not enough, so no matter what direction you were heading in, all of them had to be pulled up for a walk. Now, with the addition of the yellow in the Supreme Mystery, the number of cultivators had already exceeded 2,000. There was a lot of room for choice, so they could pick and choose. Lu Xiaoyi's bickering suggestion was to remind them that the Heaven's Choice ones were not blockheads. Couldn't they change their tactics? It was very reasonable, but it was completely unworkable. Unless they had spies in the Heaven's Choice group. Old man Xian Xian stared at him. Your nonsense has made me spend a lot of time thinking. If Buddhism really takes the field, I'll teach you a lesson. This old man was very unreasonable, but he was old and had a high cultivation level, so he could only endure it. That night's banquet ended at sunrise. The two old men left together. Jinjuan de Jia returned to his abode to refine elixirs. Qing Xian had to return to Taishan Mountain. Lu Xiaoyi covered his head. Oh, I drank so much last night that I can't handle it. Now I only feel a splitting headache, and the world is spinning. Senior sister, can you lend me your gums so that I can recover from the alcohol? He was kicked out, and the door of the abode behind him slammed shut. You've been to Tianxiang Courtyard at the foot of the mountain, right? You're familiar with the place. Go there and relax. Someone will massage your legs and feet. Don't you always say that you like this kind of big sword the most? I only have a scoop of cold water and a bucket of ice dregs here. Lu Xiaoyi left with his hands behind his back, not caring about the various gazes around him. He wondered if he should strike while the iron was hot and go to Jinjuan de Jia to ask for some elixirs, but he decided against it. He also had some private matters to attend to. He had to go back to Yaoing to take a look, and at the same time, check on Huang Ting's confidant. She had lost the battle. Maybe she needed a shoulder to lean on? Maybe he could take advantage of her weakness, knock on her door, and rekindle old feelings? He had been cultivating for more than 1,000 years, and he had experienced a lot. He was very strange. In the world of cultivation, why hadn't he met anyone who was fickle? Was he asking for too much? Or were all the Kuan cultivators this time the clean type? Thinking about it, the most realistic thing was probably to go down the mountain and wash his feet first. He didn't know if there was a discount for the heroes of the chess war. Would they pay for it? However, he didn't think about it at all. With such fame and strength, what couldn't he do with others? It wouldn't be difficult for him to participate in a few spiritual gatherings and get to know some young Kuan cultivators who worshipped heroes. Why did he have to rack his brains to figure out how to reveal some information about the participants when he was washing his feet, just to get a discount? His brain circuits were strange. However, it could also be the reason why so many senior sisters still treated him as family despite his debauchery. There were things to do and things not to do. In his heart, he could only do something if he spent money. This was his principle. He, Lu Xiaoyi, had always been a man of principle. Lu Xiaoyi patted his butt and left to rekindle old feelings. He took advantage of the situation and left Xiaoyao Mountain behind. However, this place had become the most lively place in Zhou. This was because Huang Ting in Zhou had announced that he would give up on his own game and fully support Xiao Yaoyu's game. He would not allow Heaven's Chosen to win more than half of the 9 games. This was not an easy decision to make, because this meant that Huang Ting in Taixuan had given up his own honor. Of course, there were no shallow cultivators. They knew that Taixuan was willing to be a vassal of Xiao Yaoyu in order to stop Heaven's Chosen from advancing. However, Bai Mei was not easy to deal with. He immediately changed the name of his team. It was no longer called Xiao Yao Chess Game, but Zhou Deciding Game. Such a move immediately received the full support of the entire upper realm of Zhou. Those with talents offered, those with pills offered, and those with treasures shared. For the first time, the chess game was no longer limited to a certain sect, but truly became a chess game for everyone in Zhou. It was related to everyone. There was no distinction between one and the other. This was the goal that the 2 old foxes, Bai Mei and Xian, wanted to achieve. They wanted to start with the 3,000 little lands and force Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitter Zen to join in. Chapter 1432. The ones who were most easily moved were those small sects and forces. Among the upper sects that could participate in Zhou, apart from Xiaorao Travel and Taixuan Middle Yellow, there were also Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitter Zen Temple. These 3 sects had strong wills and a long history. They wouldn't change their minds easily. Therefore, even if Taixuan Middle Yellow decided to join the Xiaorao chess game, they only thought that it was a compromise because Taishuan's strength wasn't enough to support an independent game. They were different from Taixuan Middle Yellow. Each sect had the absolute strength to deal with the game alone. Therefore, this could be Taishuan's choice, but it definitely shouldn't be their choice. However, they could think this way, but the small sects under these 3 sects might not think this way. Every upper sect had 330 little lands under them, and they needed to play a small game. Now that the yellow of Taixuan had given up, the little chess game under it was naturally no longer meaningful. Among those cultivators who were free, those who were hot-blooded, those who had strength, and those who had pursuits, naturally flocked to the carefree mountain. Even if there were only a few cultivators in each small continent, when added together, it was a huge number. That wasn't all. The total number of Little Lu clans under Qing Wei and the other two clans amounted to 1,000. Their willpower wasn't as firm as the three upper sects. Many of them had their own ideas and were confident in their abilities, so they came here to contribute their strength at this solemn moment. Shaorao Mountain couldn't even gather 2,000 people for a game. In the end, it was Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian who benefited. Now, the situation was reversed. Shaoyao sect, Taishan sect, Taishan sect, Taishan sect, Taishan sect, Taishan sect, Taishan sect's 300 little lands, and other little lands. Together, there were tens of thousands of people. You had to choose 1 out of 5 to have a chance to play the game. People were like donkeys. They wouldn't leave even if they were chased away. No one came when the quota was unlimited. Now that the quota was in demand, they rushed in large batches. It was also in the hearts of the people, and it was also in the hearts of the Zhou Xian people who had been suppressing the fire in their hearts for more than 70 years. They couldn't bear it anymore. They couldn't retreat anymore. They couldn't bear it anymore. It was just this game. Whoever died would die. This was the true mentality of most people. At least now, they still had the feeling of generosity. If they were really pushed to that point, they would feel discouraged. The more people there were, the more important thing was that they could cheer each other on. Being able to erase the shred of cowardice in everyone's hearts was like having countless new recruits standing beside veterans on the battlefield. This was more effective than any kind of training. The plan was very successful, exceeding the expectations of the two old foxes. Therefore, the two of them spent most of their energy on selecting people. The carefree cultivators made up a portion of them. They were the survivors and had experience. The supreme Xian cultivators made up a portion of them. They were the fresh troops. A portion of the small sects and clans were the real elites. Those who were not outstanding could not be selected at all. The remaining Qingwei primordial cultivators from the previous chess game were also unwilling to leave. Of course, they were elites. Elites who had survived and had battle experience. Based on this calculation, if you wanted to squeeze into the next game of Go, it would be impossible if you didn't have the ability to do so. It was no longer a situation where even true monarch de Jia was pulled up to make up the numbers. 2,000 people, all of them outstanding people who were good at fighting. In terms of strength, at least at the level of Yuanying and true monarch in master, they were at least one level stronger than the previous game. However, the upper echelons of the two upper sects were not careless because of this. They could make up the numbers, but so could Heaven's Choice. Moreover, they were very sure that the situation here had already been leaked out of the atmosphere by spies. This was inevitable and unavoidable. Therefore, their true trump card was not these stronger participants. They were strong, but Heaven's Choice was also strong. The relative gap between them and Heaven's Choice was not widening. Their true trump card was, "You are still the main player for this game." Bai Mei looked at Kawa calmly and announced the decision of the upper echelons. There were many reasons why Kawa was chosen as the main player in the previous game. For example, the carefree cultivators did not have enough manpower, and so on. But now, the carefree cultivators had enough manpower. Although Kawa was very good at Go, she could not afford to be unrivaled. There were many true monarchs who had a higher realm than her, better skills, and sharper foresight than her. Why did they still choose her? It was not because she won the previous game. It was because of the ambiguous relationship between this woman and someone else. Their true trump card was the two spies from the fifth ring, especially that swordsman. Bai Mei reminded her, "You are the player. I should not be telling you what to do or not to do. But the situation now is a little special, so I will say a few more words. Of the 4 realms of Go, the Mo realm is always the most important. You've also felt this in your heart. You don't have to worry about the Yang spirit. We have other plans for the primordial spirit. Yuanying, as long as we are strong enough and have enough fighting spirit, we will not lose much." But the battle between the Yin spirits in the MO realm has a huge impact on the overall trend of the game. You saw it in the previous game, so you should know that I am not lying. Therefore, there are two pieces that are very important to the use of. You have to know what to do. Kawa understood very well. I know, Xiaoyi and Qing Xian. Bai Mei nodded satisfactorily. Tell me, what do you think? Kawa already had a plan. Qing Xian is very strong. But I value his organization and coordination ability more, so I will send him in the crucial dragon-slaying battle. It will be the deciding factor. Xiaoyi? Then there is no need to say. When we're sure to lose, we will throw him into the opponent's eyes. Everything will be fine. Bai Mei laughed. That was the logic. Although it was crude, it was not crude. If someone else threw this kid in, he might have a rebellious mentality. It was possible that he would work, but not put in effort. But this kid had a perverted, strange habit of having a crush on his senior sister. His eyes were sharp. Well, if he still could not handle it, he could also send a mortal to Jia. He would make sure that the kid would listen to him obediently and not do anything wrong. He was very pleased. The tiger that he had been secretly cultivating finally showed its fangs. Finally, he rushed back when Xiaoyao was at its most critical time. His hundreds of years of cultivation were not in vain. He did not forget about him in all the important events. The only bad thing was that this kid was a little unreliable. He had also prepared some of his core experiences of reading the 3 lives. He wanted to cooperate with this guy in the chessboard a few more times and make a few more yang spirits. Where did this kid go? Qing Xian is already back. Why is he not here? That Yaoing little Lu is fine. How much time does he need? Kawa reported. After that banquet, he went down the mountain to fool around for 3 days. First, he went to Yaoing. Then, he went to Huangting Mountain. He probably went to find his old lover? Bai Mei sighed. Xiaojia, you have to change. You can't go on like this. Chapter 1433. At this moment, Lu Xiaoyi was a guest at Huangting Mountain. The entire Huangting Mountain was quiet. Naturally, it wasn't as noisy as Xiaoyao Mountain, nor was it as panicked as other places. It was how it should be. It was a silence that seemed to have seeped into the bone marrow. Of course, you could also say that it was old-fashioned. A quiet mountain, a quiet orthodoxy, and a quiet person. Just like the woman in front of him, when she bent over to pour tea, her beautiful curves didn't cause any ripples in his heart. On the contrary, he also became quiet in this mountain and this person. He understood another woman, and his mouth was no longer as glib. This was the effect of the environment. Of course, it was the environment that he recognized. Xiaoyi? I just found out your real name. Unfortunately, it didn't come from your mouth. Xia Bingji's voice was soft, and one couldn't tell whether she was happy or angry. However, Lu Xiaoyi knew that there was a strong, I didn't tell anyone in Zhou Xian. This isn't a matter of trust. In fact, we were discovered on the first day we came to Zhou Xian. I just don't want to bring trouble to people I know. A lot of trouble. That's not something you should bear. In fact, he said this to tell the woman in front of him. He also didn't tell Inya or Kawa. This was what a woman wanted to know the most. Even if they didn't come out on top, at least they weren't at the bottom. In the chessboard, I'm also a player. Unfortunately, I'm not as lucky as Kawa. Lu Xiaoyi looked at her gently. I counted the days. When you Huangting were fighting in the chessboard, I was still on my way to the 5th ring. I'm sorry that I didn't help you when you needed it the most. Xia Bingji smiled. You don't have to apologize. I'm not blaming you. It's just a freak combination of factors. Huangting Taoism doesn't care about this, and I don't care either. We've already done our best to win once. Since we've worked hard, why should we be disappointed? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. I've already experienced the mentality of everyone in Huangting. That's what a true Orthodox Taoist should be like. Xia Bingji shook her head. We don't care because we can only do so much under the rules of the world. However, if the chessboard of heaven and earth was broken, the only sect among the 9 great sects that would rather die than submit would be the Huangting Taoism. We don't care because we've already made the final decision. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Why do I feel the pressure on my shoulders getting heavier? Xia Bingji laughed. Little E, if you don't feel any pressure, you won't be bothered to move forward. That's how it is in Little Rusty Land. Eating, drinking, and having a wife are your greatest contentment. The two of them were silent for a while as they recalled that short memory. It was so beautiful, yet so unattainable. Neither of them mentioned Enya, because this little princess had already given up everything she had in the chess game. Even though she had the most profound background in Huangting Taoism, it still couldn't change everyone's fate. This helplessness couldn't be changed by one's will. No matter how many treasures you had, you couldn't escape the heavenly Tao's abandonment of you. I want to go to Little Rusty Land to take a look. I heard that there's already some spiritual opportunity there. Although it's not enough to give birth to cultivators, the weather is good, and the vegetation is rich. Lu Xiaoyi agreed readily. Okay, I want to go and take a look too. The two of them left as soon as they said so. They didn't have much to worry about. As they traveled through the sea of clouds, they couldn't help but recall the carrying pole flying spiritual tool. Unfortunately, things were still the same, but people had changed. It was already unbalanced to sit on it again. For the two of them who had the cultivation of a true lord, this distance only took a few minutes. This was the speed at which they were taking a leisurely stroll. Little Rusty Land, the place where the two of them fell and lost their memories, was actually the place where Lu Xiaoyi became a nascent soul. The spiritual opportunity there was created by him, but there was no need to talk about it. First, they came to Little Bottom Village. The Liuhe River was still there, but the village had changed a little. There were more people, the houses were newer, and the children's laughter was louder. After so many hundreds of years, they couldn't find where Little Bun's family was, and there was no need to look for them. Everyone had their own traces of life. You couldn't say that being a cultivator or an immortal was the most ideal. The most suitable one was the best, especially for people like Little Bun, who didn't have the potential to cultivate. They followed the road out of the village, and soon came to the county. To their surprise, the pawn shop was still there. Although it had been renovated several times, its general appearance hadn't changed. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Look, you still left in a hurry. You didn't even know to take the things you pawned. Luckily, I'm smart. Xia Bingji glanced at him. Are you smart? Half of the things you pawned were secretly swapped, and you still have the nerve to say that. Lu Xiaoyi was startled and couldn't help but laugh. I was actually cheated by a mortal. I was wondering how this pawn shop could survive for hundreds of years. With this ability, it won't go bankrupt. As they chatted and laughed, they continued to walk forward. Of course, they wouldn't do anything because of this. To cultivators, the past was the past. To settle old scores with mortals, how calculative would one be to do such a thing? They saw the slope again, but it had changed. It was no longer steep. Of course, there were no more men who relied on the mountain to survive. Here, they began to realize that they weren't ordinary people. When they came to the prefectural city, they walked around the mansion where the two robbed the rich to help the poor. They recalled the ugly incident where the two clumsily jumped high and fell into the courtyard. Now that they thought about it, it was really a simple joy. There was no time to be so simple. That inn was one of the best rooms here. Someone's trick of coaxing and cheating finally worked. Xia Bingji stood for a long time before saying indifferently, Little E, you had a purpose from the beginning, right? Lu Xiaoyi didn't avoid it. Yes, I probably belong to the kind of people who matured early, Xia Bingji sighed. This wasn't maturing early, it was simply a bad thing in the womb. The two of them finally arrived at the nameless mountain peak. The scenery here was still the same, but the shed that was once built was long gone. However, the blue stone that the two of them used as a chessboard to play chess was still there. Although it was covered in moss, it still couldn't escape the two's divine sense. There were two large words written on it. Liar. They stood in the wind for a long time, without saying a word. The past flashed through their hearts. The past was the past, and it was no longer there. Cultivation changed a person's path. If the two never recovered their memories, they might have been a big family on this small land by now. Who knew which kind of life was better? I'm leaving. Take care. Xia Bingji gazed at him and turned around. Take care. Lu Xiaoyi replied softly. It was all over. It was really over. It was a bit sad but also a bit relaxed. On the path of cultivators, they had to learn to let go. This was a necessary condition to go further. Chapter 1434. P.S. Yesterday, the monthly votes list fluctuated a few times. The sword soldiers were on a roller coaster ride around the top 10. They could not control themselves. I want to thank many people. The Milky Way Alliance made the final decision and the support of the various alliances. But today, I want to thank these most ordinary readers. Their net worth might be average and they were all workers, but when old depraved needed help the most, they silently lent him a helping hand. Hundreds of 1,500 points or multiples of 1,500 points made old depraved feel emotional for a long time. Elmwood apple, happy day. Wind kite stars, I raise my glass to drink up the wind and snow. Childhood aqua blue, raging flame. Awkward Muzwalang, Uncle Kangwu Liang. I want to be great god. Dragon's first moon. Pighead 987. Jack Zhang. Big ice and bear. Mad. Wang Dachui without a hammer. Sword hidden in the heart. Tai Coco. Internet celebrity swordsman. Guxiaoluan. Chaotic truth. Game of history. Friend 2019, come back lightly, safe little fresh meat, Rose enchanted, Little Nine's cat, sword. Disciple book friend 2019, beauty is my love. Book friend 160313190333395, Boss Sue, SYYZY 4444, Stella 18, 7 pairs of girl shoes, thorns don't want to become a crown, Old Hook, Duke of Zhou spit out the world, Return to Heart 753, Idler from Home, Ask Yaoruashian, I am originally ferocious, Yugazishin, Spirited Ah Q, Mray, Guyu Men Jom City, Windrunner on the High Mountain, Is 30 Enough, CD Little Fish, Water Green Demon, Nitro Mushroom, King Jew, Bookworm, 10,000 Leaf Grass, Catch Alive, Pork Rib Soup, Eat Meat, Touch Blind Paste, Nian Nu Jiao, Avicii, and many, many more, including some alphanumeric brothers. Oh my god, I can't write anymore. If I continue, I'll be told that my word count is too low. Old Depraved saw everything and remembered it in his heart. Thank you all. Without you, the sword soldiers wouldn't be where they are today. Only by updating diligently and putting quality first will I be able to repay you. Thank you. You still know to come back? Senior brother Whitebrow asks about you almost every day. Kawa was very dissatisfied, but there was nothing she could do about this mischievous fellow. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Only those who cared about you would blame you. However, there were fewer and fewer people like that. He had to cherish the present. Senior sister, I saw that you were bored playing chess by yourself, so I found a guy for you to pass the time. Kawa had seen this thing before, and they got along quite well. Kawa was very happy. Little Meow, I heard that you went to the 5th Ring Road. I was worried about you. Don't follow your senior brother around in the future. It's very dangerous. Don't be fooled by the fact that you have 9 lives. With some monsters, even 90 lives won't be enough. Lu Xiaoyi found the white brows. He also had some questions to ask. Now that the battle was in full swing, Zhou Xian needed his help. Otherwise, the old man would not refuse to answer his questions, but he would definitely give Lu Xiaoyi all kinds of tests and missions. He even said that there was no such thing as a free lunch in the cultivation world. Senior brother, what do you think about the modern world reference point? Was this normal? If so, then wouldn't the datum of the present world be a cultivator's fatal weakness? Good question. Since you can notice the modern world reference point, it means that your breaking 3 lives ability has reached a higher level. The white brows nodded. What Lu Xiaoyi asked was a very important part of the breaking 3 lives ability, but it was also very easy to be overlooked. For secret knowledge like this, unless a trusted disciple had made a great contribution, it would not be easily shown to others. The white brows also subconsciously wanted to find some of the most troublesome problems in the sect recently to make things difficult for Lu Xiaoyi. However, when he thought of the current difficulty of the chess game, He gave up the idea of making things difficult for Lu Xiaoyi. Forget it, since he wanted the horse to run, he had to feed it at night. The modern world reference point. Ordinary people usually use this to find their opponent's past and future, but they often forget that there are also modern world reference points. However, modern world reference points do not necessarily mean that they are weaknesses. These are two different concepts. Just because you successfully killed Yang Yan, you can't think that this method is applicable everywhere. This is a wrong idea. The white brows pointed at him. Generally speaking, the more illusory and spiritual the technique is, the more likely it is that their modern world reference point will be like Yang Yan, which will become a weakness. However, for those whose modern world reference point is very tough, to put it bluntly, it is the body itself, like the meridians or the swordsman's sword. For most Taoists, the way of the middle is between the two, but it is not easy to judge what is real and what is fake. For example, you swordsmen cut the modern world reference point to find your opponent's past and future, while I Taoists cut the modern world reference point to find the foundation of the modern world reference point. In fact, it is the same principle. You were able to kill Yang Liang. The smartest thing you did was to choose him out of the 3 Yang spirits, and not the other 2. As the two discussed the modern world reference point, the preparations of Xiaoyao Mountain were slowly taking shape. In fact, the choice of Yang God was the simplest, and the choice of Primordial Spirit Lord was not difficult either. However, it was more troublesome to choose a large number of Yuanying and Yin gods. What really troubled White Brow and Xian Xian was whether the Heaven's Chosen One was a Taoist or a Buddhist. If they could not be sure, they could not target and could not choose the most suitable person. Unfortunately, the chess pieces that Zhou Xian had planted among the Heaven's Chosen One were not high enough and could not come into contact with such high-end secrets. The Heaven's Chosen One always had 2 teams, one Taoist and one Buddhist. No one knew who would attack until the last moment. That was something that could only be decided by a limited number of Yang gods. It was not that they did not have a trump card. They had borrowed 50 elite Yin gods from the Bitter Zen Temple. Their purpose was to have the means to fight against the Buddhists in the battle of Yin gods in the demon realm. When the opponents were all monks, it was actually very difficult to fight a team battle. Especially in the demon realm Go game, the Buddhist monks' various Buddhist enchantments were very annoying. These could only be dealt with by the ascetic Zen monks, who were also Buddhists. Yes, White Brow and Xian Xian still assumed that the opponents were monks this time. This was because the Heaven's Chosen One had only lost 1 game in the Carefree Mountain. It was still within the rules and should not change so quickly. A month later, the Carefree Mountain was packed with people. Whether or not they were participating in the battle, many cultivators came here. This was because this was the first time that Zhou Xian had 2 upper sects to attack together. Whether this method was feasible or not depended on the result of this game. Auspicious clouds lingered, and auspicious air filled the air. This time, White Brow did not mobilize before the battle. There was no need for that. The 9 Yang gods were all present. The 40 primordial spirits were all selected. The Yin gods were all present and full of energy. The Yuanying were all elites and were in high spirits. If they could not win before the Heaven's Chosen One paid attention to this arrangement, then there was really no need for Zhou Xian to continue defending. The heaven and earth chessboard shook. Amidst the thunderous cheers, the cultivators filed in. Because there were many experienced veterans in the team, the entire team of 2,000 people was very calm. It was Buddhism. The judgment of the 2 old Yang gods was right. Fortunately, they did not listen to someone's nonsense. Kawa was calm and natural. This victory gave her a strong confidence. In the chess game of the demonic realm that she presided over, the 200 Yin gods had several trump cards. With the overall command of Qing Xian's dragon-slaying plan, the tit-for-tat of 50 ascetic Zen Buddhas, and Zhou Xian's biggest shit-stirrer, there was no reason to lose under such preparations. This time, she guessed the black chess piece and decided to attack. Main momentum. No more stingy, digging for scraps. The star position was Tianyuan. This was Kawa's momentum. At the same time, Several other battlefields started fighting at the same time. The young gods in the deity realm were still dawdling, especially the heaven's chosen young gods, because the opponent Zhou Xian had a young god who was very good at severing 3 lives. On the primordial spirit battlefield in the immortal realm, the two sides fought steadily and did not easily cross the line. This was a tacit understanding between the two sides. They both placed the main battlefield that would decide the outcome of the game in the demonic realm. The Yuanying and the mortal realm were once again mixed together, but Zhou Xian's Yuanying this time were obviously stronger than last time, and many of them had experience fighting against monks. Although the heaven's chosen monks had strengthened themselves after knowing about Zhou Xian's changes, the two sides were evenly matched. Judging from the situation, it was going to be a long battle. The only variable was the demonic realm Go. Kawa was full of confidence and moved quickly. The opponent did not show any weakness and was tit for tat. He did not take the position just because Kawa took the momentum. Instead, he also used the momentum to fight against her, showing his firm determination to confront her. If they both took the momentum, the battle was inevitable. Before they entered the middle game, the two sides started fighting in several places. For a moment, the whole game was entangled, and there was not a single piece that was guaranteed to survive. Chapter 1435. It was Kawa's first time playing such a straightforward game of strength. Because she had the guarantee of playing this game, she did not have to worry about the strength of her chess pieces, nor did she have to worry about a player that she could not get rid of. What was there to be afraid of? If I can't get rid of you, I'll let go of Xiaoyi. Several large dragons rolled and rolled towards the center of the abdomen, entangling with each other. Amidst the encirclement and interception, you break me, I block you. The game between the first and second pieces had never stopped. In this process, there were also pieces that Jia Hua couldn't get rid of, but there were also pieces that Zhou Xian couldn't get rid of. It was precisely because of these variables that the entire game of chess became more exciting and more exciting. Everyone had the opportunity to kill the opponent's dragon, and everyone had the opportunity to kill back. The collision of qi was also between the first and second chess pieces. It was impossible to calculate precisely. It could be because a chess piece was difficult to get rid of, and victory or defeat kept changing in the process. One moment, Zhou Xian had the advantage, and the next moment, Heaven's Choice had the lead. The dragons kept switching back and forth between turning from danger to safety and losing again, leaving the spectators on tenterhooks and unable to predict what would happen next. In such a tense atmosphere, the qi between the dragons became tighter and tighter. They started to withdraw their qi. Pounce, bump, touch, connect, hit, rob, all kinds of moves emerged. The back and forth between the first and second chess pieces was even more frightening. The other battlefields were calm like water, but the demonic territory was full of murderous intent. Everyone could see that the other 3 battlefields were no longer meaningful. The victory of Yuanying was definitely after Yinshin, and the direction could not be determined. As long as one side won in the demonic territory and rushed up, the primordial spirit battlefield in the celestial territory would immediately turn from balance to reversal, and then rush up to the celestial territory. The demonic territory was the eye of the game. Kawa was weighing the pros and cons. Which dragon should she kill first? She had to make a decision because this meant which battlefield she would put Qing Xian into. Since the start of the game, in the process of mutual chess pieces, Heaven's Choice had failed 3 times, and Zhou Xian had failed 4 times. This meant that Heaven's Chosen had also invested their elite forces in the Demon Realm's Yin God battlefield. Zhou Xian's cultivators were chosen from the teams of Carefree Wanderers, Tai Xian's Middle Yellow, and Rogue cultivators. On the other hand, the Heaven's Chosen one was probably chosen from a dozen or so great nations. There was still a gap between them, but it was not obvious. She didn't need to use Lu Xiaoyi, this killer weapon. In fact, the best time to use Lu Xiaoyi was when one side had completely lost all hope. Then he could use it to reverse the situation and make the final decision. But now, there were several dragons of different sizes. If he used it rashly, he might be able to decide the life and death of one big dragon, but he wouldn't be able to decide the direction of the other big dragons. What she was thinking about now was how to put Qing Xian into the little white dragon that was about to enter the killing chess. Or would it be the great white dragon that had more than 30 members? This was a difficult choice to make, because the small dragon was also related to the large dragon, and the large dragon determined the small dragon. She wasn't the only one making a choice. Heaven's chosen player was also making a choice. It was safer to kill the small dragon, but it was more risky to kill the large dragon. Seeing that the opponent's last move was to pounce on her tiger eye, this move was a useless move, because as long as she removed this chess piece, the fate of her great white dragon would be released. This wasn't a normal move in a normal chess game. Only cultivators would play like this, because the opponent's only reason for doing so was that he thought she couldn't remove it. This chess piece should be the most powerful one among the Heaven's chosen one. She had a lot of adaptations. The simplest one was to use Xiaoyi to remove it. But the disadvantage of doing so was, what if the opponent was playing tricks? What if this time, she stuffed a cannon fodder into the tiger eye? It was equivalent to using her most powerful trump card in a place where there were only a few gains and losses. In an instant, the opponent helped her make a decision. Since the opponent was betting on the small dragon, she would bet on the large dragon. So, she didn't care if the opponent's next move was to kill the children. She commanded Qing Xian to throw the large dragon into the killing chess. At this point, both sides had no way out. They could only bite the bullet and continue. One in front and one behind, the Heaven's chosen one killed the small black dragon, and Zhou Xian killed the large white dragon. In the small battlefield, Zhou Xian's black chess piece was considered to be killed by the Heaven and Earth chessboard, so its strength was only 70 to 80% of its original strength. Similarly, because it was considered to be surrounded and killed in the big battlefield, more than 30 white chess pieces were also limited to 70 to 80% of their original strength. Among them, more than 10 chess pieces were actually in a state of 2 battlefields. It was a mess. It was all a mess. Kawa had done her best, and the rest could only be left to the chess pieces, the carefree people, the Taishan people, the bitter Zen people, and the rogue cultivators. And Qing Xian, whom she had high hopes for. To be friends with Xiaoyi and come here from the distant 5 rings to be spies, their strength couldn't be weak. Especially, this was a cultivator with the calm demeanor of a general, much more reliable than Lu Xiaoyi. As for Xiaoyi, she was best at doing unexpected things, stirring up trouble in the most unlikely places, but in some places she was sure of, she liked to be clever and risky. The battle started at the same time. No one could see it, so they could only wait anxiously. In the distance, more than 10 Qingwei primordial young spirits were still watching, and one of them sighed, "This girl is good at playing chess. She has imagination and dares to fight." Originally, if our Zhou Xianin's spirit chess pieces were stronger, the situation wouldn't be so stalemate. But previously, she failed once more, and this is terrible. If it were our disciples, we wouldn't be so passive. Another young spirit asked, "The risk is greater than the opportunity to gamble like this. There are fewer little dragon people, so the time to end the battle will be shorter under normal circumstances. Has she joined the 2 5-ring spies? Otherwise, she wouldn't be so desperate." In everyone's guess, the battle was fiercely going on in 2 spaces, testing everyone's nerves and determining the overall situation of Zhou Xian's defense in the future. If this battle was lost, Xiaoyao Yu and Taishan Zhonghuang would be eliminated at the same time, which was an unacceptable loss. But Kawa wasn't too worried, because in her layout, Qing Xian wasn't the only trump card. In fact, the reason why she dared to let the more than 10 little black dragons be besieged was because she knew that they were all ascetic Zen monks. This was an arrangement she had made in secret during the game of chess. She intended to use these 10 or so stones as bait. Of course, the opponent may not be willing to follow her pace in chess, but no matter what, her arrangement was now playing a role. Because they were all eminent monks of Buddhism, even if these 10 ascetic Zen chess pieces couldn't achieve a reversal of victory, Heaven's Choice Buddhism would not be able to end the battle quickly if they knew everything. They were all from the same sect and origin, and those Buddhist twists and turns were something that could be seen through at a glance. It wouldn't be a problem to stabilize the defense. The rest was up to Qing Xian. Hopefully, Xiaoyi's five-rings friend wouldn't disappoint everyone. Chapter 1436. Everyone was on tenterhooks. Only a certain guy on the chessboard was doing nothing and was not worried at all. He suddenly remembered something. It seemed to be very important. Ever since the start of the war, another fragment of the universe had collapsed. He did not seem to have come into contact with this thing. The Tai-E fragment had collapsed just like that without a sound. He had not even heard of anyone who had obtained such a fragment, let alone seen it. Had it collapsed and disappeared? He needed every fragment, and he had never been too anxious about it. Every time the Great Tao collapsed, he would always have the opportunity to see these things. However, ever since the collapse of the Tai-E fragment, it seemed that all his luck had disappeared. For more than 70 years, he had never heard of such things appearing anywhere. Could it be that they had all been picked up by others? He had never heard of the blue sky five rings. As for Zhou Xian, he had not had the time to go out. This situation was very normal in the whole of Zhou Xian. Ever since the invasion of Heaven's Choice, no one had gone out of the bounded domain. It was also impossible to find. What he was considering now was whether the ruins of the En's Cave True World had any remaining fragments. He had come into contact with this innate spiritual treasure before. He had sold fragments of the Great Tao to it before. Would it still recognize him? Just as his thoughts were running wild, the chessboard suddenly glowed brightly. Zhou Xian was the first to succeed in killing the Great White Dragon. Since the black pieces on the chessboard could no longer be reversed, and there were only a few free white pieces, it was decided that the white pieces lost. The Yin gods of Heaven's Choice were unwillingly kicked out of the chessboard space. The remaining 140 Yin gods of Zhou Xian began to cross the boundary. At this moment, the human realm was still undecided. The immortal realm was still entangled. The immortal realm was still stagnant. The Heaven's Choice player sighed and admitted defeat. The direction of the wind had changed. Not only for Zhou Xian, but also for Heaven's Choice. Every force was considering how to deal with such a change. Under the trend, if they did not change, they would lose. In the previous games between the two sides, most of them followed the same strategy. Zhou Xian entered the game independently by going up, while Heaven's Choice entered the game independently by going up. Zhou Xian made this choice because the cultivators of his own sect were more cooperative with each other. Tianze chose this because there were enough Shanghua cultivators. No matter what, he could exhaust Zhou Xian to death. If one Shanghua failed, he would send another. With the opponent injured, how many rounds could he last? The actual situation was indeed as such. Other than the 10,000 Buddhas worshipping heaven, who was indeed very strong and could withstand 3 formations, the other Zhou Xian upper sects only had the strength to withstand 1 formation, such as the Huangting sect, the Human sect, and the current Carefree Travel sect. In fact, there were also other considerations behind this kind of individual battle. For example, how would they cooperate with each other after mixing together? How much effort did he put in? How was he going to talk about his merits and rewards? It was also related to the honor of the upper country and countless other issues that could not be brought to the table. This was the tradition of Taoism. For a special group of cultivators, it was very difficult to make them so close to each other that they did not consider their own losses and future distribution of benefits. After all, they were not a group of farmers who did not have high expectations. In a field battle, such a way of fighting was courting death. There was no cooperation. However, in this way of determining victory and defeat in a game of chess, the Taoists stubbornly insisted on the old-fashioned way that they had persisted for millions of years. In any case, they would not be at a disadvantage to Heaven's Choice because Heaven's Choice had enough Shanghua cultivators. Zhou Xian was the first to change. It was not because they were more innovative, but because they had no other choice. If they did not change, they could only be eliminated one by one. Even if the remaining upper sects were the strongest, they would only win a few more rounds. The strongest Xiongwa cultivator of Heaven's Choice had also not entered the field. This was the way of the Taoist competition. First, the shrimp soldiers and crab generals, then the vanguard generals, and finally the commander-in-chief. Fortunately, Heaven's Choice had a few flexible yang spirits. Under the push of white eyebrows and xian, and under the stimulation of 2 consecutive victories, the attitude of the remaining 3 sects, including Qingwei, finally relaxed. Firstly, there were indeed benefits to doing so. Secondly, it had formed a brilliant general trend in the entire Zhou Xian. It was impossible for Heaven's Choice to tolerate another failure. They would inevitably gather strong people to invade. At that time, the several major battlefields would no longer be so calm. It was very difficult to rely only on Xiaoyaoyu and Taishan sect. New forces had to be added. The remaining upper sects finally sat together and began to discuss the issue of the coalition forces. Xiaoyaoyu, Taishan, Zhonghuang, Qingwei Immortal Sect, Yuanshe Dongjin, and Bitter Zen Temple. For a chess game of 2,000 people, there was a lot of manpower. The key was how to choose, how to weigh the pros and cons. Should they set up a team or multiple teams? How to cooperate? Who would preside? There were countless problems that needed to be discussed and solved. For these, they had to immediately come up with a plan. The Heaven's chosen people from the outer space were also gathered for a meeting. Like Immortal Zhou, because of the current situation, they had no choice but to sit together and begin to discuss the key to breaking through this situation together. Although they did have far more manpower than Zhou Xian, it was impossible for them to continue like this indefinitely. The spies in the domain had already spread the news that the people of Zhou Xian had begun to completely integrate. This meant that in the next chess game, they would always have to face the most powerful part of Zhou Xian's strength. The strength of one upper country was no longer enough to deal with it. The integration of Heaven's Choice was imperative. Compared to the people of Zhou Xian, the integration of Heaven's Choice was more difficult. Buddhism accused Taoism of not having the spirit to forge ahead and not giving their all. Taoism complained that Buddhism bullied the weak and feared the strong. They did not have good results against the powerful upper sects of Zhou Xian. In fact, deep in their bones, they were full of distrust for each other. They all wanted to preserve their strength and let the other party fight against Zhou Xian. In this kind of chess game, there was a big difference between giving their all and not giving their all. If they did not give their all, the losses in a game of chess would only be 10 to 20%. Most of the losses would be in the Yuanian class. But if they fought to the death and did not retreat, many light injuries would become serious injuries. Serious injuries would lead to death, and the losses would increase exponentially. Buddhism looked at Taoism, and Taoism looked at Buddhism. They all wanted to use less effort to take advantage of the situation. They each had their own ulterior motives. Under such a premise, there was the recent situation where Buddhism saw that the Yin spirits of the demon realm were defeated and did not bother to fight on the primordial spirit battlefield. There was no end to the accusations. Because in reality, both sides did not intend to form an alliance. Because each of them had enough strength to form their own elite team. When the number of people reached a certain limit, there was not much meaning in having more people join. Anyway, they only needed to choose 2,000 people. It was more likely that because of their bad relationship, they would ruin the game of chess. Heaven's Choice had 9 upper countries left. Taoism had 7 upper countries left. They were still far stronger than Zhou Xian. Then, in fact, they only lacked a constraint to urge both sides to give their all. In the cultivation world, what could stimulate the potential of a force the most? It was not an oath, but destruction and benefits. Of course, they were not on the verge of destruction. So, the only thing that could make everyone sit down and talk about was benefits. Chapter 1437. P.S. I'm not in a good state. Old Fallen was promoted last month, but I feel that this plot isn't very satisfactory. It's a little exaggerated. It's not just the book, it's also the person. Give me some time to adjust. The quality of the book speaks for itself. Old Fallen is an honest man. To be honest, I need to slow down and find a rhythm. Writing novels will always encounter such situations. My mind is distracted and I have no inspiration. It's like a severe hemorrhoid patient shitting after eating spicy crayfish. Thank you for your support. Have a good dinner. Daoist Liang sat upright and said seriously, Zhou Xian has 3,000 continents, 9 of which are continents. Why don't we make a bet? Monk Hauda closed his eyes and focused.
How?
Daoist Liang already had a plan. Previously, we won 4 rounds. Daoist school won 2 rounds against Haunting Human Sect, and Buddhist school won 2 rounds against Wanyan Thousand Buddha. Then, let's make an agreement. If Heaven's Choice enters Zhou Xian, we'll each take the upper sex under our name and their subordinate continents. Daoist school will take Haunting Human Sect, and Buddhist school will take Wanyan Thousand Buddha. The remaining 5 continents will belong to whoever takes them. What do you think? Hauda smiled. Zhou Xian has 5 sects left. Among them, Xiaoyao Pass is especially difficult. They've already become a de facto alliance. Therefore, this pass will be the most costly since the war began. I think that if we win this round, we'll get Xiaorao Travel and Taixian. After that, we'll take turns and rely on our luck. Sure. The 2 of them clapped their hands and made an oath. This kind of bet was full of variables. If they wanted to take more territory in Zhou Xian, they had to bleed more. Daoist school made this suggestion because it was their turn next round. If they worked harder, they could get 2 continents and more than 600 continents in one go. That would be a great advantage. Buddhist school didn't care. In fact, they looked down on Daoist school. If they could win this round, they would suffer heavy losses and weaken the strength of Zhou Xian. Buddhist school could finish the battle. Everyone had their own thoughts. As for the next 4 rounds, under Zhou Xian's all-out effort, there probably wouldn't be any top forces left to participate in the heaven and earth chessboard. It would be much easier. Both of them had a good plan. As for who would end up tricking who, it would all depend on their own strength. At the very least, this method would allow both sides to go all out without holding back. This time, both sides were finally serious. Lu Xiaoyi didn't like this kind of battle. There was no end to this kind of fight. Fortunately, Bai Mei and the others had changed the rules. Otherwise, if they were to fight for another 70 years without being able to leave the realm, wouldn't they be annoyed to death? The only good thing about this was that because of the frequency of the battles, he could test out his newly comprehended sword skills without restraint. He also had a stable period of time to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had the opportunity to fight. Kawa treated him like a nuclear warhead and would not use him easily. This was trust and loneliness. It had been 200 years since he became a monarch. The Tai fragment had fallen for more than 70 years. Thinking about it carefully, his greatest gain in personal strength was the 100 years he spent in the sword Tao Steel. Now that he had mastered the Xianyuan scabbard, it seemed to be very fulfilling. However, he vaguely felt that the great fame he gained on the battlefield was not enough to make up for his mediocre personal strength. If he wanted to reach the strength of the Crow ancestor, this speed was still a little slow. However, he didn't know how he could speed up. He knew a little about Go. He knew that there was no such point in Go that could play the role of one piece to defeat another piece. The closest thing was to fight for the key position, where others couldn't defeat him, and that would lead to changes. In a cultivator's game of Go, the tiger form was a very awkward defensive form. In a mortal's game of Go, the only way to deal with the tiger form was to pounce on it after making preparations, resulting in a calamity. However, in a cultivator's game of Go, the tiger form could brazenly pounce on it, leaving one helpless. Such a change had changed the game of Go beyond recognition. It had long since broken away from the concept of normal Go. Kawa used him correctly because he was not a pawn here. He couldn't keep pouncing. He only had one chance to use it, and he had to use it on the edge of the blade. In the Go game of 4 realms, this was the only place that limited the ability of an individual cultivator. No matter how great your ability was, you could only break one eye and kill one piece and one dragon. This was also the most variable realm among the 4 realms. The heaven's chosen people were not fools. They had lost 2 games in a row in the demon realm, which made them realize the advantage of Zhou Xian in the demon realm. How would they deal with it? Lu Xiaoyi didn't go to Kawa. He knew that as a bad Go player, he was not qualified to make any suggestions. Whether it was in the 5th ring or in the current Zhou Xian, he couldn't reverse the situation with his own strength unless he was now the Sun Spirit. Qing Xian was still teaching him about Go. Both of us appeared in a battlefield where we killed a big dragon. Of course, we would win. But you have to understand that there are many big dragons in Go. They are separated and independent of each other. You can win a big dragon, but it doesn't mean you won the final victory. So, it's very appropriate for us to separate. If we have an advantage in both areas, it's very difficult to lose. Just like last time, the opponent was defeated by more than 30 pieces. He had no more pieces. Lu Xiaoyi was too lazy to think about this. It was too complicated. Swordsmen shouldn't be worried about this. This Zhou Xian really makes people speechless. Didn't a group of yang spirits and primordial spirits think of directly solving the problem with high-end combat power? If it was the 5th ring, who would pay too much attention to this completely unpredictable demon realm? The heavy burden must be placed on the yang spirit, then the primordial spirit. Try to solve the problem at the top 2 levels. Qing Xian's heart was filled with sorrow. The biggest difference between a Dao battle and a field battle is that one has rules and the other has no rules. Heaven's Choice has the ambition to lead the main world's cultivation world, but it doesn't have the courage to break all the bottles and jars. Its future achievements will be very limited. Lu Xiaoyi looked up at the starry sky. Through the rolling clouds, he seemed to be able to see Heaven's Choice's banner fluttering in the wind. But he knew that under such majesty, there was a huge difference between Taoism and Buddhism. There were only 3 possibilities for such a difference to fully manifest. The 5th ring's army sent reinforcements. Unfortunately, they only sent reinforcements to 2 spies. The Heaven's Choice continent had internal strife. Unfortunately, the most troublesome orthodoxies had already been expelled from the continent. The last thing they were doing now was to never retreat and never give up in this game. It had to be this game. Because if they couldn't win this game, Heaven's Choice would feel that their hopes were getting dimmer and dimmer. Because there were still 4 more games, the road ahead was long. If it was only Qing Wei or ascetic Zen's resistance at the end, they would feel regret in their hearts. Only when Heaven's Choice saw that victory was in sight would they erupt with greater enthusiasm. Of course, Qing Xian also understood this logic. As long as they can hold on for 2 more games, Heaven's Choice Taoist Buddha will place a heavy bet and send out all their elites. If they can hold on for another 4 games, most of Heaven's Choice's elites will be eliminated and their strength level will begin to decline. Based on my understanding of Heaven's Choice, they won't hold on until the end. As the saying goes, if they can't use up all their strength, they can only consider retreating. At most, they will have to fight another round of Taoist and Buddhist alliance. If they still lose, the grudges between Taoists and Buddhists will no longer be controlled. They will blame and push the blame to each other. At this time, they will be more wary of each other than they are of us. 5 games, at most 5 games. Chapter 1438. P.S. On the 31st, there are many old Alliance Masters who have quietly joined the League. Polar Bear Yu Xiaoyao, Jinren Xiao, Stephen T., 3ZZZ, Yunka 2011, Brother Ho HG, Brother Da, Foot Digging Man, and so on. You're all old readers. I'm lazy this time. I won't update you one by one, because I have too much debt. I can't pay it back. There are still nearly 200 chapters of debt. How do you think I can pay it back? I can only wait for the adjustment and try my best to update. As long as there is, I won't hide it. Thank you for your support. You've made my dream come true. It's enough. Let's take it slow. Thank you, everyone. If Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian could understand the key point, there was no reason that those old yang gods couldn't understand. They also understood that in addition to strength and cooperation, the most crucial factor that could determine victory and defeat was willpower. In the previous battle, both sides couldn't talk about willpower. Everyone thought that there were still people behind them who were related and didn't owe them anything. Therefore, after a battle, the death rate was only between 10% and 20%. Most of the remaining people who were beaten out were those who were unwilling to fight to the death after being injured, so they admitted defeat and retreated. It was hard to say how many of them really couldn't hold on, and how many of them took advantage of the situation to withdraw. However, this time, the people of Zhou Xian, who realized that they were at the final juncture, made a change. They chose the cultivators who entered the game based on their fighting will first, and then strength. How could one measure willpower? There was no way to measure it. Therefore, there was only one requirement: either win or die. Such a requirement was very difficult for the Taoist cultivators who had always been carefree. They couldn't do it before because there weren't enough cultivators. After all, those who had the determination to fight to the death were in the minority. Now that the number of cultivators had increased, it would be a joke if they couldn't pick out 2,000 people out of tens of thousands of cultivators. Moreover, the courage to sacrifice was contagious. When this trend was established, with continuous victories, there would be more and more cultivators willing to step forward bravely. No one was born brave, but it also depended on the surrounding environment. Bai Mei proposed, and the Yang gods agreed. Starting from Yang God, they no longer needed to maintain the situation for stability. Instead, they wanted to cut off 3 lives. Everyone understood the principle of starting from me. The Sun God took the lead, followed by the primordial spirit True Lord. He wanted to form a moral public opinion that it was shameful to come out with serious injuries. This was inevitable in the war mode, and it was impossible to rely purely on one's intuition. Even someone as powerful as a 5-ringed soul master would put in effort in this aspect. Bind. Coercion under the influence of righteousness. Of course, there were also countless rewards. This was the blood that the masters of the 9 upper sects had to pay. They had led this realm for hundreds of thousands of years and had obtained countless benefits. It was time for them to spit out a big mouthful. Bai Mei looked at the dozens of Yang gods present with a grim expression. Everyone, the disciples have been mobilized. Now, it's up to us, the old ancestors, to set an example. I won't say much. If you can't bear to part with your thousands of years of cultivation, then you don't have to fake your way up. Leave it for those who are willing. To be honest, I, Zhou Xian, have never met a Yang spirit since the beginning of the Go game. If I don't meet one, how can I set an example for the others? Out of the 9 spots, I will take one. It is my responsibility to take the initiative. Old man Xian spoke up at the right time. I'm old. I don't think I'll be able to last until the end of the era. Why should I care about a few hundred more years? Count me in. Yang spirit cultivators would not be provoked. However, as the 3 pillars of Zhou Xian, the reason why they could stand in this position for hundreds of thousands of years was because they had their own strength of character. In the first 2 games, Xiaorao Travel and Tai Xian had suffered heavy losses. Since the 3 of them were willing to stand out now, they had to take the lead. They were not here to join in the fun. In the end, 3 Qingwei Yang gods, 2 Yuanshi Yang gods, and 2 great Buddhas of bitter Zen came out. These people were very experienced in slaying 3 lives, and they were also more battle-hungry. They went all out. This was the style of a great cultivator. Being secretive and taking one step at a time was not the style of a Yang god. Zhou Xian was ready to go all out. However, Lu Xiaoyi was drinking with the slug. His friend was a little absent-minded. Although he wanted to kill the enemy, he was not selected in the selection of the sect. Because he did not have enough time to become a monarch, he was no longer as glorious as he was in Jindan. This was actually the normal trajectory of a cultivator. It was like a top student in primary school who was ordinary in high school and became ordinary in university. When countless top students gathered together, most people would become mediocre because their circle was smaller and there were more evildoers. The slug's glory was in the Aurus core realm. When he was in the nascent soul realm, he had already fallen behind everyone else. Now that he had struggled to become a monarch, he was completely ordinary. In this aspect, Hairlip was actually similar to him. It was impossible for all 4 friends to shine in the end. Lu Xiaoyi was very lucky to have a friend like Qing Xian who could follow him closely and not fall behind. He could not ask for too much. There was no way to comfort him. This guy had a bad temper and was stubborn. He did not listen to others. When he was with his former friends, he felt the difference and would automatically alienate himself. This was a common problem for proud people. If Lu Xiaoyi did not take the initiative to find him, this guy would still avoid meeting him. Among the four, Lu Xiaoyi was the closest to this guy in terms of temperament. Unfortunately, this was not something that others could help with. No one could. He could not persuade him, but of course, he could not discourage him. The best way to comfort such a friend was to find something for him to do and make him feel that he was still useful to his friends. It's been more than 70 years, and I haven't heard any news about the Tai fragment. Slug, your Qingwei is well informed. Help me ask around. I can't wait. The slug was confused. When did you start studying the 5 ties? What does this have to do with your sword vein? Do you want to fly out with your sword and return the universe to chaos? Lu Xiaoyi smiled proudly. It has nothing to do with the sword vein, but it has something to do with me. When I become an immortal one day, I'll overturn the universe with my sword and let everyone start anew. I'll give you the birth of an ancient beast. Do you like Shengliu? Or Jiuing? Slug reluctantly said, All right, I really owe you. But I haven't heard any news about it. Everyone is stuck in the bounded domain and can't go out. Where can we find the fragment? I can only help you ask, but I'm not sure. Lu Xiaoyi did not expect him to do anything. He had even asked Bai Mei, a young spirit, but he also did not know anything. But the slug had other ideas. Dao, when you come back, give me a copy of Heaven's Choice's coordinates. The sect is very strict in this regard and does not allow people to go there easily. I'm thinking that after this war ends, no matter what the result is, I'll go out and walk around. As a cultivator, it's not shameful to cultivate to supremacy. But if I still can't let go of my shackles and go out to see the world, then wouldn't I have wasted my life? Lu Xiaoyi was sad. He knew that this was his friend arranging a way out for him. First, it was to find opportunities, and second, it was to see the vastness of the universe. He could not refuse such a request because he was actually the same kind of person. If he was going to be like this for the rest of his life, then why not go out and walk around more? For people like them, dying on the journey and dying in a foreign land was the best ending, not dying of old age in an immortal cave. Yen Bo's last words of regret were actually about this. As a friend, other than supporting him, he had no other thoughts. Why did he have to be so wishy-washy? Chapter 1439. The cruel third round began. However, the process was different from the past. This time, as the peak of cultivators and the ancestors of all cultivators, the young spirits began to exert their strength. It was beyond the expectations of the Heaven's Choice. They had indeed changed their minds, but they had not changed too thoroughly. They had not been mentally prepared to deal with the challenge of Zhou Xian on the level of young spirit. They had thought that the winner would be decided by the cultivators below. A Qingwei young spirit showed his brilliance. He was also one of the few young spirit great cultivators in Zhou Xian whose strength was above that of Bai Mei. In his early years, he had wandered the universe bravely and fiercely. In the past few hundred years, he had returned to the sect because of the change of the Great Tao. Coincidentally, the strength of the Heaven's Choice young spirit he was dealing with was very ordinary, which made it convenient for him to kill him quickly. When the low-level battle had just reached its climax, the divine realm of the Yang spirit had already undergone a great change. The Qingwei Yang spirit took the lead on the premise of some luck. Then, he cleverly joined forces with Bai Mei. One cut appeared in the world, and the other cut the past and the future. Soon he won another city. This time, the Heaven's Choice Yang spirit had to go all out. The battle of the Yang spirits instantly became a battle of life and death. Their original method was to slowly find the opponent's weaknesses and mistakes in the torment. But now it was 7 against 9, and Zhou Xian's young spirits were all aggressive, abandoning the previous safe strategy and becoming extremely aggressive. This forced the Heaven's Choice Yang spirits to follow suit. They could either admit defeat or go all out. Normally, in a battle between Yang spirits, one would attack and the other would defend, or one would attack and the other would defend. There was a strong sense of foresight in it, so it was very easy to stall for time. However, once both sides began to attack and cut each other's lives, the situation would become extremely dangerous. The Zhou Xian Yang spirit had long had this intention, but the Heaven's Choice Yang spirit couldn't drag it out. If it dragged on, the advantage in numbers would become more and more obvious. At that time, they might not have a chance to fight for their lives. It turned out that even if the Yang Spirit Supreme had the ability to be reborn, it could still be very fast when they really killed each other. They cut each other's lives, found the opponent's mistakes in a flash, and covered up their own weaknesses. Once the rhythm was accelerated, they would immediately distinguish the difference in ability. In the human realm, the Yuanying were in the midst of a bloody battle. The Yuanying of Zhou Xian wanted to prove their worth. They were not dispensable and could also play a role in the game of chess. The Heaven's Choice Yuanying was also carefully selected. If they succeeded, they could eventually occupy a piece of land in Zhou Xian. With such a huge reward, how could they not risk their lives? In the demonic realm, both sides were ready to attack. Black and white were confronting each other, and they were in the final stage of the battle. In the celestial realm, primordial soul stage cultivators danced and charged, moving about freely in the chessboard. In a short period of time, close to 10 primordial soul stage cultivators had died in battle. None of the people from Zhou Xian retreated, and neither did anyone from the Heaven's Choice Taoist sect. Both sides had realized that this was a fight to the death. Thus, he gave up all his fantasies. At the very least, he wanted to drag someone down with him before he died. Just as the battle below was getting more and more intense, the clouds suddenly gathered, and the game ended. The outcome of the battle between the sun gods had been decided. The chessboard of heaven and earth announced that Zhou Xian had won the battle in the upper realm. Only when everyone was ejected from the chess piece space did they realize what price the ancestors had paid for this victory. On Zhou Xian's side, Qingwei, Yuanshi, and Bitter Zhen had each lost a sun god. On the other hand, the Heaven's Choice sect had lost 6 sun gods in battle. The remaining 3 people were really unable to hold on, so they surrendered. This game of chess was also the fastest game of chess in more than 70 years. In less than 3 days, the outcome of the battle between the top forces had already been decided. Such an example immediately stimulated the bloodlust of the cultivators below. Everyone knew what a sun god, supreme, meant to a force. In view of the absolute advantage of the Heaven's Choice sect in terms of the sun god level, even if the exchange ratio was 1-2 in the future, the first to be wiped out would definitely be the upper realm of Zhou Xian. They were all the ancestors of the major forces, the pillars of their sections. How could they allow the exchange to continue? Therefore, there were all kinds of petitions and many persuasions, asking the ancestors not to be too crazy. The outcome of the game of chess should still be decided by the number of cultivators below. Under any circumstances, the old people used their brains, and the young people spilled their blood. This was the only rhythm of the war. The most profound meaning of this crazy battle between the sun gods was not that the sun gods should fight like this in the future, but that it fully mobilized the determination of the cultivators below to fight to the death. At this point, the understanding had finally been unified in Zhou Xian. There was only one game, and they would never back down. It finally feels a little like a real Dao battle. In addition to being limited by the rules, the tactics are also slightly rigid. Hey, the battle in Zhou Xian could have been dragged on steadily for 100 years without a problem, but why does it become bloody and cruel whenever you get involved? Qing Xian was very emotional. Lu Xiaoyi didn't fall for that. What does it have to do with me? It has more to do with you, okay? The first 2 dragon slayings in the demon realm were organized by you. I was just a pawn and my role was limited. Moreover, isn't this kind of change good? At least there's still hope. Their original fighting style is like boiling a frog in warm water. In the end, they won't even have the courage to resist. Zhou Xian should thank us for the changes we brought to them. If we didn't win the first game, I don't know how low their morale would be now. Qing Xian looked at the sky. It's clear. The Buddhists will attack next. Their way of betting on the continent can't be done by a single orthodoxy. The Buddhists will think that we've suffered heavy losses and think about how to take advantage of it. At least we don't have to be in a dilemma when choosing the participants. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. In fact, he couldn't pick out anything. The so-called restraint in the cultivation world was only relative. You couldn't say that you could defeat the Buddhists, and of course, there was no such thing as Buddhists defeating Taoists. When they really fought, it was still a contest of strength. The only advantage was that there were indeed many Taoists who had relatively rich fighting experience against monks, and their cultivation methods were indeed directional. For example, among the remaining 5 upper sects, Xiaoyaoyu, who was good at spiritual power, and Yuanshi Dongjin, who was good at mystery, were relatively weak against the Buddhists. This was because the Buddhist spiritual stability was well known in the cultivation world, and there was no way to take advantage of it. Relatively speaking, Taoists like Qingwei and Taixien, as well as Bitter Zen Temple, were the most important forces to deal with the Buddhists. Of course, this was at the lower level. When one reached the sun spirit level, these so-called taboos actually didn't exist. This time, the sun spirit suffered heavy losses. Next time, I'm afraid it will be Yuanying's turn. Why do I feel that this chess game is getting more and more intense, but I'm getting more and more relaxed? Other than killing a few in the first game, I don't even have a chance to play in the remaining 2 games? Qing Xian snorted. Of course you're free. Anyone who has a partner who plays chess will be free. I can't compare with you. I always lead people to fight at the most dangerous time in every game. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. This is called the justice of the heavenly Tao. When I was fighting desperately in the 5th ring, you were sleeping soundly in the blue sky. Why, now that you've played a few more games, you're feeling unbalanced. Chapter 1440. The 4th game. The Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect had come prepared and had made thorough preparations. They had arranged elite troops at all levels. Sensing the different positions of Zhou Xian, they did not dare to ignore every battlefield. The Yang spirits in the divine realm were in a stalemate. The Yang spirits in Zhou Xian had changed their strategy and were defending and counterattacking. The primordial spirits in the immortal realm were also carefully probing each other, but their current caution was not the same as before. Previously, when they encountered danger, the cultivators would withdraw from the game. Now, even if there was danger, they had to go against the risk. These were 2 different kinds of caution. Battle formations began to appear on the Yuanying battlefield. This was the common choice of both sides, because a purely hot-blooded attack would cause a lot of unnecessary losses. Now, both sides knew that the opponent would not retreat easily. It was no longer a matter of hot-bloodedness, but more of a test of technical and tactical cooperation. It was precisely because both sides had truly returned to normal that the battle was even more dangerous. There was an unconcealable killing intent in the calm. The Devil's Realm had once again become the focus of the battle between both sides. The Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect knew very well why they had failed in the previous battles. The battle between the Yang spirits was just an exception. The real key was the Yin spirits in the Devil's Realm. Kawa had won another challenge. She was also thinking about how to use Lu Xiaoyi in the most efficient way. This guy had been very idle recently. Because he had been regarded as the last trump card, he had been watching the fun leisurely. However, Kawa had a sense of crisis. If she used him like this again, would he really not be able to play the role he should have at the last moment because of the limited influence of his height? For real go, it was not necessary to determine the winner at the last moment, although it might be true in most cases. There was also a kind of victory called control. However, for the Cultivation Go game, because of the chess pieces themselves, the chess players might not be able to completely achieve their own strategic intentions. Of course, it was impossible to have complete control from the beginning to the end. What she could do was to ensure that her chess pieces were in a state of encirclement against the opponent during the crucial battle for the chessboard. She could maintain the advantage of numbers, and the strength of the surrounded chess pieces was suppressed by the heaven and earth chessboard. This was the way to win. In this game of Go, the opposing player had adopted a very stable way of playing Go. Connected. Almost every space of the living chess pieces was connected to each other, forming an iron wall. The advantage of doing this was that he didn't have to worry about being surrounded by his opponents, because there was no way they could surround him. However, there was also a certain flaw, which was that the efficiency of the chess pieces was not high, and a portion of the chess pieces was wasted on the links. If this kind of chess was placed in the mortal world, it would undoubtedly lose. That was because there was a rule where even the first move had to be posted. Every move was crucial and indispensable. How could you waste so many chess pieces on collusion? The only reason for doing so was to make a decisive move on one of the enemy's chess pieces while ensuring his own safety. This also meant that the Heaven's Volition Buddhist sect would place their top-notch experts in the area of the chessboard. Kawa could not guess which part of her territory her opponent wanted to attack, but she could deliberately create such a situation so that her opponent had no choice but to attack her. As long as there were enough lone chess pieces and the structure was loose enough, there was no need to worry that the opponent would not fall for it. This was a competition of wisdom. At this point, it was also a competition of the chess piece's own abilities. It had long surpassed the scope of Go. She already had an obvious advantage in the space of the chessboard, leading by more than 20 points. If this were an ordinary chess game, she would be able to win in the middle. But here, the battle had just begun. What Kawa was doing was to strengthen the other parts of the chessboard as much as possible, while ignoring the lone chess pieces that she had deliberately left behind. Under the deliberate efforts of both sides, it was equivalent to condensing the huge chessboard battlefield into 7 or 8 squares near the Tianyuan. It was almost like a clear statement. Let's have a decisive battle here. Both sides were very clear that the other side was very clear about their own thoughts. In the midst of not giving in to each other, they walked step by step toward the final decisive battle. This was the way of the Heaven's Volition Buddhist sect. They knew that the Zhou Xian players were very good and could always make outstanding moves. Therefore, they didn't compete in the myriad of possibilities. Instead, they competed in a head-on confrontation in an open and above-board manner, handing the victory of the game to the chess pieces. In this sense, the Heaven's Volition players had achieved their goal. Kawa had also achieved her goal because she finally didn't have to keep a trump card to deal with possible final changes. This was the end. For her, as long as she let little E out, what was there to worry about? If the two spies were both among them, the 8,000 monk army could be buried, let alone a few dozen. Both sides had achieved their goals. The next thing to compete was to see to what extent the chess pieces they had placed high hopes on could meet their expectations. Everything was carried out around this goal. The chessboard became unusually quiet and peaceful, as if two modest gentlemen were playing chess, stopping when it was appropriate and reciprocating politeness. It was also because of this clear goal that their progress here was much faster than in the other 3 battlefields. No one was stupid. They could all see that the Demon Realm battlefield played a connecting role in the entire game. In the chessboard, Lu Xiaoyi was leisurely studying his swordsmanship. This was the starting point of the chess pieces. However, the chess pieces could not be seen or sensed with one another. It was as if each of them was in an independent space. It was also good. There was no need to communicate in groups of 2 or 3, say some encouraging words, entrust each other with their last wishes, whether or not one's mother or daughter needed to be taken care of, etc. Yes, the mother was definitely gone. He believed in Kawa and Qing Xian. Perhaps this was another battle that did not require blood and sweat. It was also good. He could watch others fight and sharpen his sword. However, this was destined to be an extraordinary chess game for him. It was not because of Kawa, but because an unfamiliar consciousness was transmitted to him. New disciple of Heaven's Eyes, please receive the imperial edict. Lu Xiaoyi habitually looked left and right. The consciousness became stricter. Disciple of Heaven's Eyes, Lu Xiaoyi. Lu Xiaoyi had really forgotten about this identity. Oh, I'm here. Isn't there still an observation period and a slow-down period? Giving out the task so soon? Is it a benefit? Although I don't know who you are, I can't get out of Zhou Xian's heaven and earth chessboard. If I go out, I will be dismembered. I have to make it clear to you in advance. Don't blame me for not performing the tasks seriously. The consciousness obviously did not expect this little new disciple of Heaven's Eyes to talk so much nonsense before he gave out the task. However, after thinking about it, those who had their own beliefs were often very difficult to deal with. The only saving grace was that their ability to complete the task was not bad. When, where, and who to give out the task is decided by Heaven's Eyes. Of course, it will be considered thoroughly. When did you have to question it? I will remember this mistake. If the task is not completed, I will deal with you together. Chapter 1441. Lu Xiaoyi was also afraid that he would say too much, so he stopped talking. However, he wasn't talking nonsense just now, but was slightly testing the attitude of the Heavenly Eyes organization. Now, it seemed that it wasn't too strict. If he couldn't complete the mission, he would be punished. In other words, if he completed the mission, it was okay to talk back occasionally. The voice was calm and indifferent. There is a Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect that is coveting the source of fate of Zhou Xian and wants to use external forces to enter the core of Zhou Xian to add luck to Buddhism. This kind of behavior is against the rules of the Immortal Court, so the Heavenly Eyes are ordered to stop it. Therefore, you don't need to leave the realm, because this mission is in the realm. It is also because you are the only disciple of the Heavenly Eyes in the realm of Zhou Xian that the mission can only be completed by you, even if you have indeed not been in the Heavenly Eyes for long. Concise and to the point. However, Lu Xiaoyi still had a lot of questions, so he was careful. Can I ask a few questions?
Speak.
Lu Xiaoyi asked, isn't this mission too broad? Too vague? There is no specific person to point to. There is no precise time of occurrence. There is also no clear location of the mission. There are tens of thousands of people in the Heaven's Choice Buddha sect. Even if I am a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal, I may not be able to keep an eye on them. Moreover, there are young gods and primordial spirits in the chessboard battlefield, not because Lu Xiaoyi cherishes his life, but because it is the truth. You expect me to complete the mission under the eyes of 9 young gods, dozens of primordial spirits, and hundreds of Yin gods. This is a bit inappropriate, right? The voice said, there are some things I will tell you, and some I won't. This is based on your level and status in the Heavenly Eyes. What I want to remind you is that the Heavenly Eyes don't appreciate those nagging cultivators the most. They pick and choose, and they make excuses. The Heavenly Eyes have never been slandered for millions of years. This is a sign of our loyalty to the Heavenly Tao. Since this is your first mission, and it is indeed a bit complicated, I will try my best to explain it to you, but I hope you can understand that this is the first and the last time. Lu Xiaoyi had achieved his goal. As for whether it was the last time, he would talk about it next time. Zhou Xian's predecessor was the Tao Lord of Destiny. This was not a secret in the cultivation world, which was why it had attracted the attention of countless cultivation forces. On the eve of the great change in the universe, there were many ideas. Yes, but not all of them were correct. As one's realm increased, one would naturally know these things. The core of Zhou Xian was deeply implicated. It was the core of the Tao fusing Tao of innate Tao. It didn't allow anyone to touch it easily, not only the cultivators of the mortal realm, but also the immortals of the immortal court. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. In the past, there were immortals who came here to take advantage of this place. As you can imagine, they lost their immortal status forever and only had themselves to blame. The matters of the immortal court will be resolved by the immortal court. The matters of the mortal world will be handled by my Heavenly Eyes. You are one of them. It's just a coincidence. Lu Xiaoyi would not pester him endlessly at this time. He was very serious. It was all information. The actions of the Buddhist sect are dishonorable, but they are not the entire sect. Only a few of them belong to certain forces and individuals. It's not suitable for them to expand. The heavenly eyes set the tone for this operation. Lu Xiaoyi felt disdain in his heart. What individual force or person? If it was really an individual, how could they gather hundreds of thousands of heaven's choice cultivators to act as a cover? It was nothing more than the immortal court having the backing of the Buddhist sect. The heavenly eyes couldn't afford to offend them, so they turned big matters into small ones and small ones into nothing. The heaven and earth chessboard originated from ancient times. In fact, it was a chessboard on a blue stone. As time passed, the Tao Lord of Destiny took a fancy to this chessboard and transported it to Zhou Xian to fuse with it. Only then did the current Zhou Xian upper realm come into being. However, the blue stone was abandoned because it was originally an ordinary stone. To cultivators, it was indeed an ordinary stone. However, to the heaven and earth chessboard, it was the mother stone that had carried it for countless years. Therefore, in terms of effect, this ordinary stone had a special meaning to the heaven and earth chessboard. The Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect found this ordinary stone from somewhere, so all kinds of things happened after that. After the voice finished speaking, it began to assign specific tasks. Among the 4 realms of the heaven and earth chessboard, there were too few people in the immortal realm and immortal realm. Therefore, it was very difficult to sneak in without anyone noticing and completely avoid the eyes of the opponents and the players. Therefore, it couldn't be them. Yuanying in the mortal realm, because of their cultivation level, their ability to move around in the core of Zhou Xian is very limited. Sending them in would be no different from courting death. Therefore, it couldn't be them. In the devil realm where there are only Yin spirits, the situation is very complicated. There are many people fighting against each other, so it's very difficult for the players to deliberately pay attention to the disappearance of one of the cultivators. Cultivators in the Yin spirit realm also have the ability to move around in the core of Zhou Xian. Therefore, we judged that during the most intense battle in the devil realm, the Heaven's Choice Buddha would bring the mother stone into the chessboard and take advantage of the gap to enter the core of Zhou Xian. Your task is to stop him, because the origin of destiny shouldn't be contaminated. No one can. Lu Xiaoyi still didn't ask any questions, because there were many specific operational problems. As expected, the heavenly eye's voice continued to sound. You can't tell who has the mother stone, because it's just an ordinary stone. Cultivation methods are useless against it, but what I want to say is that it's precisely because of the influence of the ordinary stone on the heaven and earth chessboard that this person is immortal in the heaven and earth chessboard, just like the sun god. You just have to find which Heaven's Choice Buddha doesn't die in the battle, then he's the one who carries the stone. Lu Xiaoyi raised an objection. Since he doesn't die, how can I stop him? The heavenly eye's voice said, I'll tell you where his weakness is later. If he loses the support of the heaven and earth chessboard, he's just an ordinary monk, because he's the one who carries Buddha's wishes. If he sacrifices himself to the origin of destiny, then the chaotic destiny of the universe will shift towards Buddhism, which is also disadvantageous to Taoism. Lu Xiaoyi was very puzzled. Since there's the mother stone, why didn't the Heaven's Choice Buddha sneak in earlier? Why did they have to do it when both sides were fighting? The heavenly eye said, the Buddhists want both the fish and the bear's paw. They want to get the favor of destiny, but they also want to get the upper realm of Zhou Xian. In this game, this person can help the Heaven's Choice win with his immortal body, and he can also enter the core of Zhou Xian. Isn't this killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Lu Xiaoyi found a loophole. If this person doesn't die in the game, it will definitely affect the direction of the game. If I put my energy on him, where will Zhou Xian be? If it's because of the heavenly eye's mission, won't I be unable to help Zhou Xian? I've fulfilled my promise to the heavenly eyes, but violated my obligation to Zhou Xian. This isn't my style. The voice hesitated for a while. You just need to find a way to complete the mission of the heavenly eyes. As for winning or losing the game, you don't have to worry. We'll handle it for you. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. How can you handle it? The heavenly eyes snorted. The heaven and earth chessboard is also under the control of my spiritual treasure system. It's just that it can't control the power of the mother stone. It's instinctive. Just like the method we taught you to kill him. In fact, It's just temporarily cutting off his connection with the heaven and earth chessboard. Chapter 1442. P.S. In March, I can't remember how many times fruit has tipped me. Of course, it could also be that she purposely forgot because she really couldn't afford it. It was every author's fortune to have such readers. How could Old Fallen be so lucky to receive such love and support? At the beginning of the month, several Milky Way Alliance members made Old Fallen overwhelmed. Hence, the monthly votes reached around 20,000 at the end of the month. At that time, Old Fallen didn't know that there would be double at the end of the month. He thought that since the monthly votes had reached this position, and considering the fact that under normal circumstances, he could enter the top 10 with 23,000 monthly votes. Hence, he shamelessly shouted for everyone to help him enter the top 10. After that, he knew that there would be double at the end of the month. He knew that things were bad. Under such circumstances, there would be a fierce battle at the end of the month. Everyone would feel uneasy about spending so much money. Old Fallen reached the end and had thoughts of giving up. Adding 11 chapters had also exposed his mentality. He was afraid that forcing everyone was not his intention. In the last few minutes, Fruit sent to the Milky Way Alliance again. To be safe, he sent another 3 normal alliances. This aroused the enthusiasm of the readers. In the last few minutes, he rushed from 11th to 7th. He didn't know how to express his gratitude. Even the most practical edition was not firm. This made Old Fallen ashamed. All he could say was that the quality of the book was worthy of Fruit's love. Thank you. Words couldn't express it. I remember that the cornerstone of the existence of pre-celestial spiritual treasures is impartiality. Hold the center. Will they listen to your orders? Lu Xiaoyi was a little suspicious because he didn't want Kawa's efforts to go down the drain. That voice was a little impatient. What do you mean by impartiality? Does such a thing exist in the cultivation world? Even the heavenly Tao is biased. If there is really no bias, your neighbor should be a worm. How did you get to the green sky 5 rings? How did you get back to Zhou Xian? If the pre-celestial spiritual treasures were really holding the center, you wouldn't be able to go anywhere. This was the truth. Before Lu Xiaoyi could fully recover from the mission of Tian Mo, Kawa's battle had already begun. Qing Xian, the most important chess piece, was thrown into the battle, but there was no move. It was just a simple stick. Kawa was deliberately showing weakness to lure her opponent into a fight. But in fact, she was thinking too much. At this point in the game, how could the two sides have any other options? The two sides were entangled in a ball of chess. At this time, there were no longer any rules and attention to detail. The only thing they were fighting over was the question of who was encircling who. However, this problem was actually very complicated. Because you have me in you, and I have you in me. The chess pieces near Tianyuan were thrown into the battle one after another. You were encircling someone, and you were also being encircled. The question of how to balance and how much combat power to suppress was probably only known by the heaven and earth chessboard. Lu Xiaoyi was the last break point. He threw himself into the eye of death, and then he was brought into the battle of chess. This was Kawa's mentality. Anyway, no matter who won this game, there was a gap of almost 40 points between the top and bottom. No one could make up for it. In the battle of almost 70 chess pieces, the number of people on both sides were similar, and the situation was similar. It was a competition of ability, and there were no tricks. Entering the battle space of the chessboard was not a random entry, but a whole team of chess pieces. Of course, how to play and move after entering was the cultivator's own business. The space was not big. To avoid stalling for time, it became a game of searching for people. Before entering the chessboard, the 200 Een spirits appointed dozens of battlefield commanders, which was helpful for coordination during the battle. Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian both had the highest command. This was due to their achievements and reputation. No one could say anything about it. Return to the team. In this kind of situation, we still need to cooperate. Lu Xiaoyi's decision was very moderate. This was not his character. If not for that damned Heavenly Eyes mission, he would have led people to kill their way out. But now he couldn't just care about his own happiness. He still needed to find the undying monk with a stone among the monks. This required him to participate in the team battle and carefully distinguish between the groups. This damned Heavenly Eyes system. He had long noticed that there was a big secret in the core of Zhou Xian. He went there with the slug before he became a nascent soul. After that, he was entangled with countless things and forgot about this place. Now that he mentioned it again, he was in a different mood. He actually didn't dislike the Heavenly Eyes mission too much. When he returned to Qingkong from Zhou Xian, he vaguely felt that Taiposhi wanted to pull him into the Heavenly Eyes. So when he returned to the Fifth Ring, he asked a few elders in Xianyuan about this, such as Lufeng and Guandu. In fact, they weren't familiar with the Heavenly Eyes because they didn't have any contact with it. But one thing was certain. The Crow ancestor seemed to have joined this organization before, so he didn't have any psychological burden and didn't have to worry about doing something against his will. This was also the reason why he pretended to dawdle and finally agreed to the giant tree's invitation. Like this mission, overall, it was in line with the Heavenly Eyes rules. The origin of destiny was hidden here, and it might be very important. It shouldn't be dug out to affect future generations. Instead, it should be made naturally with the changes of the era. This was also something that Taoists had always insisted on. Let nature take its course, and not take a bite out of it just because they knew there was something good here. Obviously, Buddhism didn't have such a mentality. Their general attitude was that this thing was destined to be with them. There must be some other way. Perhaps it wasn't something that could be obtained by just one person. Bearing Buddha's wish? This was very thought-provoking. He didn't believe that this was just the Buddha's wish of a monk in the mortal world. Could a Buddha's wish in the mortal world shake the origin of destiny? Then, thinking further, to be able to bring this thing to the core of Zhou Xian and really achieve something from the core, the thing behind this was very thought-provoking. This was cheating. It was very likely that some senior monk of the immortal court cheated through a monk in the mortal world. This was much better than coming down, personally. Standing in the teeth of the storm and carrying out such a mission was a challenge for him. It was very likely that he was being used as a knife. But after 1,000 years of cultivation, he understood a principle. Why could he be the knife and not someone else? Don't underestimate being a knife. At least it proved that you had the strength to be a knife. There are countless cultivators in the great Zhou immortal world, and they only found you, Lu Xiaoyi. This might be to be used as a knife, but in the process, there is also a chance and good fortune. Cowardly people would be timid because of this, afraid that they would become a thorn in the side of the entire Buddhist sect. But brave people saw a rare opportunity in this. In layman's words, riches and honor were found in danger. Even the heavenly Tao wouldn't be able to see you if you still blended into the crowd after becoming a perfected sovereign.
He wasn't worried about his sect.
The Fifth Ring was already fighting with the Buddhist sect to such an extent. Could it be that he still wanted to mediate? Of course, he could do whatever he wanted. Therefore, he really took this mission seriously. This was the reason why he changed his personality and obediently moved closer to the main group. When he wanted to be obedient, someone didn't want to let him do as he wished. His small team only had 3 people. In fact, when placed on the chessboard, they were like 3 chess pieces connected together. On the opposite side, there were also 2 monks flying towards the main battlefield. They were probably very confident in themselves. After seeing the 3 of them, they directly crashed into them. Senior Brother Lu, should we fight or? A Qingwei-in legend had just asked when Lu Xiaoyi's flying sword had already shot out. At the same time, he had already moved to another place. The remaining 2 Taoists thought that this senior brother Lu had a bad temper. When they were about to follow him, the space in front of them was already filled by the Sword River, and they were nowhere to be seen. The next moment, the Sword River retreated. Only 2 balls of Tao vanishing, celestial phenomenon reverberated in the air. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. You dare to block my way with such ability? Are you 2 idiots? He somewhat understood. Even in the main battle group, it was very difficult to distinguish such a monk. As long as the monk hid, he definitely wouldn't be able to see through it. Why should he passively look for him? Wouldn't it be better to let the monk come to him? As long as he was strong enough and killed indiscriminately, this monk who originally had the intention of helping the Buddhist sect would definitely take the initiative to find him. This was the reason why he used all his strength to kill the two monks. He wanted to let the other party see his threat. To get rid of him, was there anything more suitable than sending an undying monk? Chapter 1443. The space was not big. Lu Xiaoyi and the other two quickly found Qing Xian's main force. Both of their divine senses collided and instantly communicated. Lu Xiaoyi, you take charge, I'll do it. Qing Xian, isn't it time for a change? Next time, but not this time. This time, I'm involved in something else. If you lose sight of me, don't panic.
Just stay calm.
Lu Xiaoyi had to tell him in advance, even if he could not be too clear. This was not an ordinary scene. It was of great importance. The task of the heavenly eyes was related to the destiny of the entire universe. Even if there was a slight deviation, it would cause the destiny of a large number of cultivators in the human world. In this sense, it was more important than a single world or region, even if it was as big as Zhou Xian. He did not want to give up on any of them, so he had to answer to Qing Xian. Your organization. Don't worry about my situation. The core is to establish an advantage as soon as possible. Don't worry about casualties. Are you sure? I'm sure. Qing Xian took a deep breath. This was not part of his plan. Under normal circumstances, with him and the swordsman in charge, this game would not be lost. As long as the strategy was right, there would not be too many casualties. However, he trusted his companion's intuition more, especially some inexplicable intuition. This grandson must not have told him everything, but there must be some special reason for him to risk his own safety to establish an advantage quickly. The swordsman was unreliable. It meant that the more ordinary things were, the more unreliable they were. However, the more important things were, the calmer this person was. If you want to hurry up, I have to do it too. Don't worry, I'll use the most radical method to make you die here. Don't worry about your senior sister, I'll take care of her. Both sides' formations were not fully formed. There were still scattered chess pieces coming from all directions. It was not in line with the cultivators' habits to start a fight now. However, since the plan had been decided, there was nothing to worry about. In this aspect, Qing Xian's willingness to gamble was not lower than Lu Xiaoyi's. With a leap, Lu Xiaoyi had already cut into the formation of the monks. The sword river circled around his body as he charged forward with a sudden assault. His goal was very clear. He wanted to break up the formation that the monks had yet to form. Behind them, Qing Xian led her men and followed up. They formed groups of several people and attacked freely. They only targeted those monks who were scattered by the impact. Their attacking methods were also extremely fierce. They didn't care about their own safety and only wanted to kill the enemy. The other Zhou Xian cultivators didn't quite understand the reason behind this, but since the two leaders did this, there must be a reason. It should be because the other battlefields weren't going well, right? There were more than 20 monks, but not all of them had arrived. They were all the most outstanding eminent monks in the Heaven's Volition Buddha sect. He could deal with one or two of them, but it was impossible for him to deal with over 20 of them at the same time. Thankfully, his objective was only to drive them away and not to kill them directly. The reason why he did this was because he felt uneasy in his heart. When it came to battles, he had never placed his hopes on others, not even the Heaven's eyes. It was impossible for an inexplicable voice to make him submit willingly and trust him completely. This was not suspicion, but caution. If he could help Zhou Xian secure victory, then why would he place his hopes on the Heaven's eyes to instruct the Heaven and Earth chessboard to cheat? Before competing with the immortal monk, he had to establish his advantage. This was the reason why he didn't care about anything and frantically stirred up the situation on the battlefield. He and Qing Xian were both experts at killing people in chaos. This change in Zhou Xian immediately caused the monks to have no choice but to follow suit. The situation on the battlefield immediately became chaotic. Lu Xiaoyi took advantage of the situation and started a massacre. He didn't even bother to observe who was dying. If that monk didn't die, he would eventually meet him. Wherever he met him, he would just meet him. Before that, it was the right way to deal with people first. In the arrangement of the Heaven's Eyes mission, there were still some things that he couldn't see clearly. Just in case, he didn't hesitate to do more in the early stages. After coming to Zhou Xian, this was the first time he was going to fight in his full state. Even when he went all out, he still didn't look for monks who were relatively difficult to deal with and unfamiliar with Buddhism. To kill such monks, he needed to probe them in the early stages.
He didn't have the time.
He would kill monks whose martial arts were in the direction of merit because it was easiest for him to break through the defense of such opponents. He could achieve the greatest effect in the shortest time possible. As for the remaining monks, it didn't make much of a difference to Taoists whether they cultivated merit or not. Qing Xian had always been ensuring his safety. Although he said that it didn't matter, the two of them had known each other for 700 years and were already very close. How could he let his friend be in danger? With him and another monk, ascetic Zen, who was purposely brought along as a backup, Lu Xiaoyi was able to unleash his full strength. The swordsman went all out and attacked without any hesitation. In terms of killing speed, it was much faster than other orthodoxies. In just a short moment, more than half of the 30 monks were killed. Most of them were killed by Lu Xiaoyi. However, he still hadn't met the immortal monk. The remaining monks finally seized the opportunity and huddled together. There were 16 of them in total, but there were 27 Taoists surrounding them. Lu Xiaoyi's hard work had finally established an advantage. If Qing Xian still couldn't grasp such an advantage, then there was no need to say anything else. He could feel that there was still a monk wandering outside the battle formation from afar. It seemed like he was late, but he knew that wasn't the case. There were a total of 34 Taoists who entered the battle. 2 of them died in the battle just now, which meant that there were still 5 Taoists who were supposed to return. The space wasn't big, so it was impossible for them to get lost. If they hadn't returned yet, it could only mean that they would never return. As for why they couldn't return, other than the monk wandering outside alone, there was no other possibility. He and Lu Xiaoyi had chosen the same strategy. The only difference was that this monk relied on his lonesome to kill while Lu Xiaoyi chose to believe in the strength of a team. At least in terms of efficiency, Lu Xiaoyi was slightly better. Seeing Lu Xiaoyi flying towards the figure, Qing Xian warned, "Be careful. That monk is strange." Before Lu Xiaoyi disappeared, he left behind a sentence, "I'll go and meet him. I'll leave the rest to you. Not only this round, but also the next round. Become the hero of Zhou Xian, young man." Qing Xian's gaze was distant. He knew that Lu Xiaoyi must be hiding something from him. The origin of this monk was probably not as simple as just being strong. What was it? This damned guy was habitually passing the buck again. As for the future, he was confident. As long as they won this round, all the pressure would be thrown to Heaven's choice. Not only would their best batch of people lose the qualification to fight, but they would also face an even more serious discord. 27 against 16, there was no reason for them to lose. However, could that strange monk bring trouble to the swordsman? Did he disappear or perish together? It was definitely not the latter. Because they had known each other for 700 years, he didn't think that this guy would perish together with anyone. He cleared his mind and began to focus on the current situation. Since the opportunity had come, he would do his best to deal with it. Chapter 1444. Lu Xiaoyi was no longer in a hurry because Zhou Xian's advantage in the demon realm battlefield had already been established. This was a monk with a sorrowful expression. His back was a little hunched, as if he was carrying a mountain. To a cultivator, such a physical defect was almost impossible. Therefore, he might really be carrying a mountain, an invisible mountain. He looked at Lu Xiaoyi, just like how Lu Xiaoyi looked at him. He knew how dangerous this swordsman was. Even if he couldn't die here, he wasn't as fast as the swordsman in terms of killing. Therefore, if this stalemate continued, even if he didn't die in the end, he would be left alone, and his secret would be completely exposed. His name was Ming Hui, and he had come here with two goals. One of them was already a little difficult now, and he could activate the other at any time. However, before he activated it, he wanted to see if he could still achieve the first goal. This didn't depend on his defense, but on his attack. If he killed this swordsman, the Heaven's Volition sect would still have a chance in the demon realm. He clasped his palms together and chanted, "Let me become Buddha. While I'm walking, if there's a ferocious thing stained with blood, I'll use Buddha's will to contain it, feel it, transform it, and replace it with my body." He pointed at Lu Xiaoyi. "Benefactor, you have a sword pellet in your heart, and you've killed 2,900 creatures. Why don't you kill me?" Buddha made 48 vows, and the boundless world shook in 6 different ways. Deities scattered flowers in the void, and heavenly music fluttered. Thus, one became Buddha. Minghui cultivated Buddha's will, and he had an indescribable blessing. His will to self-cultivation was incomparably pure, and it had other wonderful uses in battle. For example, this wish to stop killing was used perfectly here. He replaced the killing with his body, but he still couldn't die here. This was the so-called self-deception of Buddha's will. However, he was also a capable person. He could see the number of creatures Lu Xiaoyi had killed through Buddha's will and use it to fulfill his wish. 2,900 lines, covering every stage of Lu Xiaoyi's cultivation, including demonic beasts, void beasts, insects, winged men, and so on. Even things that Lu Xiaoyi himself could not remember clearly, he had calculated them all. Lu Xiaoyi only felt that something was bothering him. If he really killed the monk with his sword, he would fulfill the condition of stopping his killing wish. The monk could be reborn because of the chessboard, but the flying sword would be transformed by the Buddha's will. Of course, it was a process to reform his flying sword. Whether it could succeed or not depended on the confrontation on the mysterious level, but he would not use this method to fight. With a leap, he appeared at the back of the battle formation. Amidst the intense battle between the two sides, he found a monk who was in a precarious situation. With a slash of his sword, he immediately finished him off. His body swayed back to Minghui's front and he shouted, "You are wrong. It was another 2,900. If we add you in, we'll have 2 more. With a shout, sword light gushed out. To stop his killing wish, there must be a vision as the foundation. Minghui's foundation was the fact that this vicious person had killed 2,900 lives. But this vicious person was really vicious and perverted. In the blink of an eye, he killed another one. Therefore, the foundation was not right, so naturally, he would be willing to destroy it. It was also a solution that belonged to people who killed. Minghui sighed. "Let me obtain Buddha." The bodhisattva of the country, in front of all the Buddhas, reveals his virtue, the tool of all the desires and desires of all the people. If he is not satisfied, he will not attain enlightenment. This was the wish to protect himself. He was talking about the Bodhi heart. The Bodhi heart was the foundation of all Dharma, also known as the root of goodness. The deeper the root of goodness, the greater the divine power of the bodhisattva. This kind of defense was a kind of conceptual conversion. You send your flying sword, I talk about my Bodhi heart. I don't care how powerful your flying sword is, I only protect how sincere my Bodhi heart is. With the same scale of immortals, how much of an immortal's flying sword has reached? How much of a Buddha's Bodhi heart has reached? If my Bodhi heart is closer to the Buddha, then your flying sword will be ineffective. To turn the might of a physical sword into a confrontation of their respective attainments, the power of Buddhist vision was indeed miraculous. It left one gasping in amazement. In comparison, it was clear that Lu Xiaoyi was much further away from the level of a sword immortal. Therefore, the sword could not reach him, returning without any results. This was the difference between the real and the virtual realm. For the flying sword to be real, one needed to practice step by step. Buddha's wish was the virtual realm. A mortal monk with wisdom could also reach a very high state of thought. Therefore, using such a method to compare, who would lose? Even without the augmentation of the heaven and earth chessboard, this monk was very powerful. But even if Lu Xiaoyi's sword could not injure him, he still had other methods. In an instant, he closed in and punched down with a fist the size of a sandbag. Such a punch was something that a country bumpkin would do, a mortal warrior would do, a cultivator would do, and even an immortal would do the same. Then, he wanted to see how this monk's proportional defense could withstand his pair of iron fists. Those who played with visions were bound to have a weak body. Those who had a strong body and bloodline were bound to have strong perception. There was no exception. Minghui looked at his approach expressionlessly. There was no other way. He was also a decisive person. Otherwise, he would not have been sent by Buddhism to carry out such a mission. The Buddha's wish he cultivated was not Amitabha's 48 wishes. If that was the case, could it be that he could reach the end and replace Amitabha with his body? It was just that he belonged to the Buddha's wish lineage and could bear the Buddha's wish of other senior monks. Heaven's Choice Buddhism had tens of thousands of great virtues. Only he could bear the Buddha's wish that came from an unspeakable place. It was only because of his special origin, Bhikkhu Laoshur. Bhikkhu Laoshur was an arhat. Bhikkhu Laoshur was a karma position while arhat was a karma position. Regardless of whether a monk was male or female, they were bound by the precepts. Because of precepts, they were bound to be fixed. Because of fixed, they were bound to wisdom. With wisdom, they would cut off the worries of the three realms and no longer fall into the cycle of life and death of the three realms. They would become arhats. Although they were arhats, their appearance was still that of a bhikkhu. Therefore, they were called Bhikkhu Laoshur. What kind of person was the happiest? It must be a person who had no worries. A person who had the slightest bit of worry would not be truly happy. Therefore, the happiest person was none other than Bhikkhu Laoshur. They truly had no worries. It was precisely because they had no worries that they had no miscellaneous wishes. Therefore, they could bear the Buddha's wish of a higher level of great virtue and use their mortal body to carry out the wish of a certain orthodoxy of a certain court. From this perspective, he was one of a kind. The heaven and earth chessboard origin stone was very precious, but what was even more precious was him as a person. Heaven's Choice Buddhism had dragged on until now to carry out such a plan. Rather than saying that they were waiting for the origin stone, it was more accurate to say that they were waiting for a person who could bear the Buddha's wish. From this point of view, his second objective was much more important than his first objective. Minghui had already realized that it would be very difficult for him to complete the first mission, which was to kill this abnormally powerful swordsman on the chessboard and then use his own efforts to help Heaven's Choice Buddhism gain an advantage in the demonic realm. He could no longer do it. Since he could not kill him, then he could only do what he could. Bring him away. The swordsman punched his body, but Minghui did not dodge or block. He allowed the meridians in his body to explode. At the moment when he was about to die, he grabbed the swordsman's fist with one hand and threw out the origin stone of the heaven and earth chessboard origin stone with the other hand. With a flash of light, the two of them disappeared. Chapter 1445. Qing Xian had been paying attention to his friend's battle. He could feel that the monk was difficult to deal with, but he was not worried about the swordsman. He knew that the monk was even more difficult to deal with. It was leaving, not dying. Even when the monk was hit by a punch, there was no sign of Dao disappearing. Then, where did he go? Was he in a space inside the chessboard? Or outside the chessboard? That damned swordsman did not say a word. He was truly an irresponsible person. No matter what, he could only focus on the present and hope that the rules of the heaven and earth chessboard would not change because of this. Zhou Xian was in a good situation now, but it could not afford too much trouble. Lu Xiaoyi felt his body being involuntarily brought into a passage that he could not control at all. In the blink of an eye, he returned to normal, but the place where he appeared was not on the chessboard, but in a place that seemed familiar to him. Zhou Xian's core was divided into 4 layers. The outermost layer was the Earth's halo, the Earth's crust, the Earth's pulp, and the Earth's core. Before he became a nascent soul, he almost died in the Earth's pulp. Of course, at that time he was only a small Jin Dan. His current position was in the Earth's core, the place where he fell into the abyss last time. This time he was still falling in. What made him sigh the most was that he was accompanied by a monk. It was just that he changed from Bendu Bodhisattva to the current Minghui Buddha. "I'm fated with Buddha," Lu Xiaoyi sighed in his heart. In the Earth's pulp, he could not use his mana. The more he struggled, the deeper he would sink into it. The best way to deal with it was to let nature take its course. He could relax and adapt to the fluctuation of fate energy here. Then, he could think of a way to get out of this dangerous place. Golden core cultivators would definitely die if they came here. Nascent soul cultivators would be better off, but it would depend on how they reacted at the time. Monarchs were much better because they had a new understanding of the Tao state. They could use their Yin spirit to travel. This was a new ability. The travel of the Yin spirit could help the cultivator's body to a certain extent, especially in a place that was familiar to Lu Xiaoyi. He could leave now, but he could not do so, because Minghui Buddha was walking fearlessly in front of them. Let's assume that I have attained the Buddha, and there is a limit to the light. If the light does not shine on 100 billion, then the people of the Buddha kingdom will not attain enlightenment. As soon as he entered the earth pulp, Minghui gave birth to the bright wish. There are 2 kinds of Buddha's bright wish. One is the wisdom light, which illuminates the Dharma realm. The other was Chongguang. Every Buddha was different. Chongguang was the light emitted by the Nirmanakaya Buddha. It could be seen with the naked eye. It was also known as body light or round light. The light that he was emitting now was normal. Under the illumination of the light, he moved forward resolutely, as if he had never considered the issue of safety after entering the earth pulp. To be able to advance in the earth pulp, this courage was worthy of affirmation. How could a person chosen by the Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect be someone who cherished their own body? However, what Lu Xiaoyi was curious about was whether the monk would continue to move forward after reaching the core of the planet. How do I get in? His mission seemed to have failed. He didn't kill the monk immediately. The problem was that he wanted to try it with his own ability, but he did not expect the monk to be so resolute. In his 1,000 years of cultivation, it was rare for him to procrastinate like this. The abnormality this time was actually some kind of speculation and suspicion toward the Heavenly Eyes mission. If he had directly laid his cards on the table with the monk and killed him according to the method taught by the Heavenly Eyes, with the sharpness of his flying sword, the probability of success would be very high. However, he had only completed a mission. The only advantage was that the Heavenly Eyes would not punish him for his mistake. However, if he had delayed, the mission might have failed. However, he really wanted to see what would happen if he failed. Minghui Buddha had pulled him into the core of the planet to fight for a chance of survival for the Heaven's Choice Buddhist sect in the chessboard of heaven and earth. At least without this terrifying swordsman, there would be a chance for them to turn the tables. However, this was the first time he had come into contact with the swordsman. With this person's combat experience, how could his fist be caught when he threw out a punch? He had done it on purpose. Because Lu Xiaoyi did not want to obediently kill him on the chessboard. Instead, he wanted to kill him in the core of the planet. Punishment by the Heavenly Eyes? He did not care. He wanted to know the truth about the fate origin at the core of the planet. If Minghui did not pull him away immediately, he would continue to be entangled with him. Lu Xiaoyi had his own understanding of fate. The principle was that he had to be bold and not be afraid of getting into trouble. Therefore, it was not that he did not want to complete the mission, but he wanted to complete it in his own way. Following behind the monk, he did not attack, nor was he able to attack. Once he used his flying sword, he would be in trouble. This was the restriction of the special environment. Even if he was a monarch, he could not avoid it. Ming Hui ignored the swordsman behind him, just like how Lu Xiaoyi ignored the monk in front of him. The two of them rushed forward tacitly, as if they were not enemies, but companions. The earth pulp was the thickest part of the entire core of the planet. The two of them were not fast, so there was still a long way to go. Lu Xiaoyi was not sure what he wanted to know. He was only acting based on his intuition. He could not make a move in the earth pulp. Forcefully making a move might put himself in danger. He set a limit for himself. Before reaching the core of the planet, he had to make a decision, no matter what the decision was. The biggest doubt was, did the fate origin really exist? If the fate origin existed, then where was the morality origin? It couldn't be biased, right? If the fate origin was really here, could it be easily influenced? Even if it collapsed and there was no one controlling it, it was still one of the 5 golden immortals among the 36 Khanate Daos. Who could influence it? Human cultivators could not. Could the deities of the immortal court? Not necessarily, right? If Buddhism had the ability to influence the fate of the great Tao, why would it be suppressed by Taoism for millions of years? Therefore, he really wanted to see this historical moment. If there was no such thing, then someone was lying. Who could it be? Curiosity killed the cat. Humans understood this logic, but cats might not understand it. Lu Xiaoyi had been with Little Meow for a long time, and he had also been infected by some of Little Meow's bad habits. For example, he wanted to get to the bottom of it, even if his current realm was not suitable for him to know too many secrets. No matter how slow it was, there would be a day when it would happen. Lu Xiaoyi had already thrown the heaven and earth chessboard to the back of his mind. He suddenly felt that such a Tao battle was meaningless. Moreover, before he left, he had already laid down the foundation for Zhou Xian. If they still could not win, then there was no saving them. As for the next chess game, many of the elites of Heaven's Choice Taoism and Buddhism had already been defeated. Even if they were to gather again, they might not be able to match their current strength. Therefore, there was nothing to worry about. He even felt that what he did in the core of Zhou Xian might have a greater impact on Heaven's Choice Buddhism than the chess game. This was a feeling. It was also a cultivator's instinct. Chapter 1446. The people of Zhou Xian no longer needed any encouragement because their morale was already at its limit. They had won again. They had already won 4 games in a row in the 5th game of Mount Tianwang of the 9 boards. This was different from the 3 games of 10,000 Buddhas because they were now dealing with the true elites of Heaven's Choice. No one would not believe that this was their bottom line. Defending the 5th game to the death had become the consensus of the people of Zhou Xian. With such a consensus, there was no shortage of enthusiastic people because they were making history. Xiaoyi, actually nothing happened, he just disappeared. Disappearing and dying are 2 different things. The most important thing is that he knew about it in advance. He also told me before, but it was unclear. This guy has a big secret. He is not only a Zhou Xian spy, but also a 5th circle spy, a human spy. If one day people tell me that Lu Xiaoyi's original body is a worm, I won't be surprised at all. Qing Xian purposely found a chance to comfort Jiehua. In fact, even he did not know the real relationship between this couple. It was weird, and he could not explain it clearly. As long as it was related to this guy, it seemed like there was no normal person. He had never thought that he was actually abnormal in the eyes of others. Jiehua sighed. Qing Xian, you don't have to worry about me. I'm already used to it. I'm not used to it if he doesn't cause trouble. I've been waiting for him to cause trouble. Now that it has finally happened, I'm relieved. He frowned and said, as long as the lantern is still on, there's no problem. But I'm not worried about him, but the next game. Are we going to be in danger? Qing Xian smiled. You don't see it clearly enough. Actually, whether it's Xiaoyi or I, we're deliberately trying to reduce our presence. In the Battle of Zhou Xian, if the people of Zhou Xian are willing to go all out, there will be no problem. The key is the mentality. Zhou Xian's momentum is already at its peak. Not to mention the fact that little E is missing. Even if the two of us aren't here, it won't be a problem to block it. But you have to believe in yourselves first. Believe in Zhou Xian, not two Fifth Circle spies. In the end, we are just passers-by, guest Taoists. We can't stay in Zhou Xian forever. There will be a day when we will leave. Kawa did not have the time to be sad. She understood what Qing Xian meant. Thank you, I understand. Whether it is the chess piece or me, the player, our confidence is the key to success or failure. But don't deliberately downplay yourself. Without the two of you, the rebellious spirit of Zhou Xian wouldn't have been awakened so quickly. By the time they truly wake up, I'm afraid it will be too late. Qing Xian nodded. That's right. If he continued to persevere, he wouldn't be able to win more than 2 rounds. There would definitely be changes in Heaven's Choice. With a team like theirs, nothing can be seen when everything is going well, but once there are changes in the middle, they will immediately fall apart. Let's just wait and see. It won't be too far away. The people of Zhou Xian were actively preparing for the next game amidst the victorious atmosphere. After Shaorao Mountain won 5 rounds in a row, not only did their confidence soar, but the key point was that a large number of experienced chess pieces emerged from within, gathering elite troops to gamble on a game. Although there was a possibility that they would be wiped out, there was also a possibility that they would become stronger and more experienced as the game went on. This was the difference between veterans and new recruits. They also played an irreplaceable role in the process of battle. Among them, a large number of leaders had emerged. They dared to fight and were good at fighting. They knew how to end a favorable situation and how to persist in an adverse situation. When these people took up the majority of the chessboard, their influence on the overall strength of the chessboard was far-reaching. As for Heaven's Choice, up until now, every group of people gathered was basically a newcomer to the game. Even if they had the strength, even if they had a thorough plan, a plan was a plan, and it was completely different from actual combat. Under this situation, the scales of victory and defeat were quietly tilting. They were not the only ones who were aware of this point. Outside the sky of Zhou Xian, in the Taoist camp, the cultivators stacked on top of each other and cultivated in the void.
It was a spectacular sight.
This was already more than 70 years after they came out of Zhou Xian, but from the way they were organized, it was no different from when they first arrived 70 years ago. This was the difference between the cultivator army and the mortal army. They had more endurance, and everyone knew what they were doing, instead of fighting for the emperor in the mortal world. On a large treasure ship at the core of the camp, dozens of Taoist young gods were drinking tea and chatting. It seemed that there was no pessimism caused by the failure at all. A Taoist laughed. This time, Buddhism really went in high spirits and returned in disappointment. They thought that they could take advantage of us after our failure? Now, it's just as shameful. Even more shameful. All the Taoists smiled without saying a word. Their current state of mind could be described in one sentence. It was really more comfortable than occupying Zhou Xian. At this point, the camp looked united, but was divided at heart. It existed in name only. This was the current situation of the cultivator war. His heart was sour, but he couldn't show it on the outside. He was too unsophisticated and superficial. He could only smile casually. He drank a few more cups of tea and smoked a few more cigarettes. Speaking of which, who invented this thing? It was really a perfect match for cultivators. A cup of tea, a cigarette, and a trivial matter for a long time in the lingering smoke. Both of them became illusory. A voice faintly said, "The next round will still be the Taoists. May I ask, senior brother, how should we deal with it?" Taoist Pang's voice was ethereal. "It's fine to deal with it normally. Just like the first time we came to Zhou Xian, we came from the same route, so why are we so anxious to fight each other? Tell the disciples below to stop at a certain point and not think too much about winning or losing. Taking down Zhou Xian may not be a victory, and returning in defeat may not be a loss." All the Taoists understood tacitly, and no one doubted it anymore. They were all experienced and knew very well the meaning behind Taoist Pang's words. Why should they ask more? The morale of the people of Zhou was at its peak. From a tactical point of view, it was not suitable to fight head-on. Instead, they should drag it out. As the saying goes, one can't hold one's breath for long. Whether or not they would launch a general attack in the future, it was the best choice to first stabilize the rhythm and slow down. The purpose of the expedition to Zhou had been partially achieved. Just like the Buddhists of the main world, no matter how arrogant the heavens chosen were, they had never thought of taking control of the entire cultivation world of the main world in one battle. They were too naive. This was destined to be a long Taoist struggle, and the end was the change of the era. There were still thousands of years left. In this process, the most important thing was how to preserve their strength to the greatest extent in the struggle. By the way, after the big game began, they could see the real positions of all sides. For example, this time, they had tested that the butt of the heavens chosen primordial fierce beast was crooked. This was the second reason. It was difficult to maintain the gap between the heavens chosen Taoists and Buddhas. If you fought with Zhou here, how could you know what your comrades on the side were thinking? It was always necessary to leave some strength for protection just in case. This was the third reason. With these three reasons, they were destined to be a bystander in the next few chess games. In the Taoist struggle, there had never been a situation where one battle was won. Chapter 1447. The Heavens Volition Buddhist sect's camp was similarly calm. Although they were a little disappointed, it was an exaggeration to say that they were gloomy. In the end, most of the monks who participated in the chess battle were kicked out of the game and not killed. The difference was too big. A few core great Buddhas were talking when one of them sighed. Minghui didn't do anything. That five-ring swordsman is unbeatable at the same level. Fortunately, he was taken away by Minghui and his fate is unknown. Then, will the Taoists take advantage of him in the next round? A Buddha snorted. They won't take advantage of him. Zhou morale is at its peak. It doesn't matter if that swordsman is there or not. Those cow-noses are smart. Monk Houda made the final decision. The Taoists made a good choice. We have to do the same. Just send some people to train. Leave the core combat power behind and wait for changes. The Buddhists of the main world have retreated and explain the reason to us. At this time, the worst thing to do is to overexert yourself. It's just a storm. We have to stop and take a look. There's no rush. Let's wait for Minghui's news. Then we'll decide on our next move. Houda calmed himself down. No one knew Minghui's move better than him. It was like looking at flowers in the fog. Even he, the leader of the Heavens Volition Buddhist sect, didn't understand it completely. This move was arranged by the higher-ups, but what was the specific purpose? Even he, including Minghui, didn't understand it completely. Therefore, his only choice was to wait and see. Lu Xiaoyi finally saw the legendary Earth Core. After passing through here, even with his strength as a perfected lord, his understanding of fate, and his familiarity with the environment, he felt more and more pressure. He could also feel the difficulty of the monk in front of him. The Buddha's light was not omnipotent. In the cultivation world, there were countless strange techniques. The key was who was using them. This monk's strength was very strong, but he was not stronger than him. How could he be so calm? He was just forcing himself. The origin of fate was just an excuse. If there was such a thing as the fate origin, then there would also be the Tao origin, five elements origin, time origin, space origin, and the other 36 innate Tao origin. Whoever obtained the Tao origin would be able to fuse the Tao. Cultivation had become a form of happiness, and in the end, the luckiest ones would become Tao-fusing cultivators? That was impossible. The origin mentioned by Tian Mao referred to an innate Tao that had already been fused with by someone. When the fused Tao gave up on this innate Tao, it could also be said that after the Tao collapsed, the fused Tao was the place where the fused Tao attained Tao. Fate itself did not have an origin. It existed everywhere, in the universe. However, Tao integration stage cultivators had their own essence. It could be a place, an object, or an illusory concept. Due to the millions of years of Tao fusing experience, there was an unbreakable connection between the Tao fusing practitioners and the innate Taos. Even if the connection was broken, it would still affect the operation of the innate Taos to a certain extent, and it would gradually weaken over time. The place where the Tao integration stage cultivators attained Tao was the core of Zhou Xian. As for the upper realm of Zhou Xian, it was just a change made by the fused practitioners to the place where they attained Tao. Therefore, in the cultivation world, such a place was called the Tao origin. In fact, it didn't really live up to the name, because if the next fused Tao integration stage cultivator appeared, the Tao origin would naturally change. However, the process was too long ago, so the cultivators in the mortal world didn't have to distinguish it too clearly. In any case, a human could only encounter such a thing once in their lifetime, and they still had to be lucky. Performing Buddhist wishes in such a place and hoping that the Tao origin of fate, or a trace of the Tao integration stage cultivator's remnant Tao, would accept such a Buddhist wish and then spread such sentiments across the universe. Such a complicated operation was naturally not something Lu Xiaoyi could understand. He didn't understand the mechanism, the process, or the effects. He was just here to watch the show. Of course, Tian Mao spoke so seriously that he couldn't help but believe it. 80 to 90%, and the remaining 10 to 20% were purely due to his habitual questioning of authority. Questioning was a good habit. It could allow humans to keep improving, and it could prevent individuals from falling into traps. Because in the conversation between the Fifth Ring and Guandu, he learned a very interesting piece of information. The person behind Tian Mao was not one person, but many. There was Lord Lingbao. There was also a human genuine immortal. There was also a primordial beast god. Then, since this was a balanced system of checks and balances, could there be only one human genuine immortal? If there was only one, which orthodoxy did he represent? Buddhism or Tao? Based on his understanding of human nature, it was more likely that one Tao and one Buddha were involved. This was the origin of his doubts. Who on earth issued this mission from Tian Mao? He didn't have any channels to obtain information, so he could only judge by himself. It shouldn't have anything to do with Lord Lingbao and primordial beast god. They had no reason to be involved in the trivial affairs of human beings, especially when it was related to the greatest orthodoxy of human beings, the struggle between Tao and Buddhism. It could only be a human genuine immortal. Simply speaking, the nature of the mission to destroy the plans of Buddhism was of course from Taoism. But he still had some doubts because the whole mission was confusing. He just had to wait and see. He didn't have any good ideas now. Psychologically speaking, he thought that the possibility of his mission failing was very high, but he couldn't rule out the possibility of getting a chance to complete the mission in the process. He didn't mean to not complete the mission. He just wanted to see more clearly in the process. It should be said that it was inevitable but also accidental. Monk Minghui stood in front of the core and began to perform Buddha's vow. Let me obtain Buddha. The hungry ghosts and beasts of hell don't attain enlightenment. Let me obtain Buddha. The celestial beings in the country have different shapes and sizes. There are ugly people who don't attain enlightenment. Let me obtain Buddha. The sentient beings in the world develop the Bodhi heart, cultivate merits and virtues, and make a vow to give birth to a country. At the end of my life, I pretended not to be surrounded by the masses, but I discovered the former and didn't attain enlightenment. Let me obtain Buddha. The sentient beings in the universe have no distinction between each other, and each have their own thoughts and views. Buddha doesn't disturb Tao, and Tao doesn't invade Buddha, and each ascend to the top. There are righteous people who believe in Buddha, and those who oppose him don't attain enlightenment. Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat when he heard it. That's interesting. He understood very well that the Buddha's vow that the monk spoke of wasn't his own. It was too big, too deep, and too vague. It wasn't something that Minghui could control with his current realm. Since it wasn't his, it must be the person who asked him to come here to express his intention to the origin of destiny in order to obtain the recognition of the remnant Tao essence of the fated person. The person's realm would be very high, very high. With the foundation of a human immortal, how could a person who dared to frankly and promise in front of the origin of destiny that in the future, Buddhism would stop spreading its teachings everywhere have a low realm? In the mortal world, even if it was a great Buddha, if he dared to say such a thing, he would immediately become the target of public criticism of Buddhism. He would become a traitor, a disgraceful person. This great vow was a little too big. It was so big that he no longer insisted that Buddhism was the only thing in the universe. Chapter 1448. Monk Minghui stood outside the core, displaying his Buddhist wish in front of him. He seemed to be in a trance and absent-minded. This was a situation that only happened when he displayed something that was not within the scope of his abilities. His current state was actually that of a puppet, a mouthpiece that was expressing thoughts that were not his thoughts. This was the best time to make a move. He did not even need a flying sword, he only needed a finger and a punch after getting close. However, Lu Xiaoyi stood straight, not far away, not moving at all. Heaven had its heavenly Tao, Buddha had its Buddhist rules, and Tao had its Tao rules. He, Lu Xiaoyi, also had his own Tao of ants. He never predetermined whether it was good or bad, regardless of race or orthodoxy. If you could give a way out to those who disagreed with you, then you were a good race and orthodoxy. If Buddhism was not so aggressive in spreading and excluded those who disagreed with it, then Buddhism would also be a good orthodoxy. Why not? If the person who made the wish, yes, it might be this immortal, really had such thoughts, no matter where his starting point was, once he made the wish, it could not be changed. To change it was to deny oneself, it was to dig one's own grave. Then, why didn't he believe it? Lu Xiaoyi believed that he was a person who believed in the process. Even if a great demon who ate people without spitting out their bones did good deeds for an unspeakable purpose, he would still be willing to respect him as a saint. It was that simple. It was better than those who had a great purpose but did things that angered the heavens and people, right? Amitabha had made 48 wishes to become a Buddha. He wanted to hear how many wishes this Buddhist monk could make. Or, how many wishes could Monk Minghui transfer to him? As the Buddha's wish continued, it was obvious that some mysterious existence in the depths of the earth's core had accepted such a great wish. Perhaps it did not reject it. Such a change was very magical, and Lu Xiaoyi could not understand it. What was the so-called origin of fate? Was it the remnants of fate itself? Or was it the remnant thoughts of a Tao-fusing expert? Or was it both? In his previous test, he could not enter the core of the core. Even for someone who was proficient in fate like him, if he wanted to enter and come out safely, the sun spirit was a threshold. But now, because his Buddhist wish had been recognized, Monk Minghui began to slowly float in. It was as if an old grandfather was saying to his grandson, "Come closer so that I can hear you clearly." Minghui was still in a daze. This was the result of bearing the heavenly immortal's vision, even though his cultivation level was not high. When the vision was projected, he naturally became distracted until the vision ended. Therefore, his current behavior was actually uncontrollable. It was a kind of subconscious behavior. Even if there was hell in front of him, he would still float forward under the unseen attraction. However, Lu Xiaoyi did not want to follow him forward. The man had vision to protect him, but he had nothing. At this point, the mission seemed destined to fail. His original intention was not to interfere with a normal exchange of Buddha's wishes. Everyone had their own demands, whether they were Buddhists or Taoists. Which side to lean towards should be their own destiny, rather than killing the other party to block the expression of Buddhism's vision. Everyone has the right to speak. Every orthodoxy had one. You can't treat the great Tao of destiny as an old fool who believes in only one thing. Do you think you can stop all of this through violence?
Can you stop it?
If you succeed this time, what about the next time? In order to achieve your goal, do you have to send an army of cultivators to be stationed here? In the mission description of Heaven's Eye, there was no specific description of how Buddhism could affect the origin of destiny. However, the meaning behind the words was vaguely pointing to some kind of evil and dishonorable method. But in reality, they were only here to express their vision. In Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, Buddhism had such a right. This was the reason why he had been staying beside Minghui but had not made a move. In the game of chess, each had their own orthodoxy. Here, one had to rely on one's own heart. The only thing that he could not let go of was that the Buddha's wish was not over yet. If Minghui continued to walk in, would his Buddha's wish be so modest and peaceful? Could it be that the Buddha's wish was just a prelude? The purpose was to enter the Earth's core and then use some other method? Was it to seek his own death and continue to observe? Or was it to save his own skin and admit that the mission had failed? He did not hesitate to choose the latter. Failure is the mother of success. The mother comes before the son, so there should be no problem in failing first and then succeeding, right? Before leaving, there was one more thing to do. That was to move half of his butt into the Earth's core and complete a purely technical test. This was also a good habit of his. He did not take risks but strolled at the edge of the danger zone. At least he could feel the pressure in the Earth's core and know what was going on. If one day he was thrown in again, he would not be at a loss. After the test, he would leave and do more practical things, such as helping the people of Zhou to guard the Earth's core. I'm just strolling. I'm not going in. With this thought in mind, Lu Xiaoyi first reached a hand into the Earth's core. Immediately, he felt something different. It was not a huge force that pulled him in by force, but a hint of information faintly revealed in the fluctuation of fate energy. It was not as ferocious as he felt outside at all. Instead, it seemed to be a kind of friendly invitation. What was going on? Lu Xiaoyi carefully identified and confirmed his feeling. That's right, the pressure he felt in the Earth's core was different from the pressure he felt in the Earth's core. If it was really the origin of fate that wanted to invite him, he would be able to feel it in any of the 4 levels of the Earth's core, right? As long as he was in the upper realm of Zhou, did he need to have a certain amount of courage first? In an instant, he made a decision. Follow in. He was not a person who was used to giving up halfway. If possible, he hoped that he could do it perfectly. He hoped that there would be a process that could make him feel at ease, whether the mission was a success or a failure. His body slowly slid into the Earth's core. It was as if he had entered heavy water and was exceptionally sticky. What surprised him was that he felt more free here compared to when he was in the Earth's core. He still followed behind the monk quietly and listened to his Buddhist wishes. He was still merciful, and there was no place that was out of bounds. Until he reached the depths of the Earth's core, there was no way to go. Lu Xiaoyi could clearly feel the pressure around him as heavy as the stars. If it was not for that trace of kindness supporting him, with his realm, he would have been crushed into nothingness in no time. Fate was like a mountain. It was also at this moment that Minghui's Buddhist wishes were finally completed. From the beginning to the end, the 47 Buddhist wishes were copies of Amitabha. Only one was missing, and one was changed. However, even with Lu Xiaoyi's relatively rich knowledge of Buddhism, he could not be sure which wish was missing from the 48 wishes of Amitabha. Which wish was changed? There were no flowers scattered and no Sanskrit chanting. There was only silence. In the silence, Monk Minghui slowly walked over. Chapter 1449. Minghui shook his head and sobered up from the chaos. He immediately understood where he was, but he did not dare to move. He was not a true Buddha, but only a name for the cultivation realm. He could be called a Buddha in front of other cultivators, but in front of the remnant will of a Tao-fusing cultivator, he was not even a small bhikkhu. He was the same as Lu Xiaoyi, 2 ants. After venting the Buddhist vow of the virtuous senior monk in his mind, he finally returned to himself. But at the same time, he also returned to being small and insignificant, losing the ability to move freely in the Earth's core. Or was it courage? But this monk was indeed magnanimous. He was born a bhikkhu, but his heart was not troubled at all. Amitabha had once made a vow that the happiness in his heart would be like a bhikkhu. He was a person like this. He quickly forgot about his own inappropriateness because he saw a person beside him who shouldn't have been there. Benefactor Lu, why did you come here as well? I'm here to fulfill Buddha's vow. But what are you here for? Lu Xiaoyi coughed lightly. He had already confirmed the process. This monk did not have any other intentions other than to perform Buddha's vow, because his current ability did not affect the origin of fate. Without the Buddhist vow of the virtuous senior monk, he was just an ordinary little Buddha in the Ean's spirit realm. The only thing they needed to think about now was how to escape. You can come here, so why can't I? In this cultivation realm, is there a place that Buddha can go that Tao can't? By the way, do you know me? Minghui smiled. Lu Xiaoyi, 5th ring Xianyuan swordsman, who in the cultivation realm of the universe does not know him. When we entered the chess game, all of us were warned to be careful of this person. I am Minghui. Benefactor Lu, did you follow me here to kill me? Lu Xiaoyi did not hide it. That's my intention. But this place is not easy to kill. Wait until we find a safe place, then we will fight to the death. Minghui was not scared by his empty words. When I was outside the Earth's core, you had the chance to kill me. Why didn't they kill him? Would swordsmen be so sentimental when it came to killing people? Especially the infamous Xianyuan Lu Xiaoyi? Lu Xiaoyi said righteously, you didn't do anything bad, so why should I kill you? It's not like we're all on a chessboard. Minghui began to understand what was going on. In fact, when he fought with the swordsman, he felt that something was off. Instead of being decisive, he seemed to be indecisive. Indecisiveness was fatal to a swordsman. But in this case, this swordsman was even more extraordinary. There were some things that he only understood after he had completely unloaded his Buddha's vow, and he didn't mind sharing them. After all, the swordsman had shown him kindness by not killing him. Even if he really did kill him, it would have been worse. Hence, he said bluntly, I don't know who sent you. But do you think that killing me would be good or bad for Taoism? Lu Xiaoyi remained silent. Minghui continued, since you don't say anything, I'm afraid that you have some guesses in your heart. There is no distinction between Taoism and Buddhism in destiny. But if you really expose the fact that Taoism respects the other schools of thought on the surface, but excludes dissidents in secret, I'm afraid that it would be beneficial to Buddhism. So, if you kill me, you'll complete your mission, but you'll make a big mistake. If you don't kill me, you won't complete your mission, but you'll leave behind an endless legacy. Do you understand what I'm saying? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. I don't understand. I never thought that small characters like us would affect the direction of the battle between Taoism and Buddhism. Master, you overestimate me and overestimate yourself. Minghui didn't say anything because he had achieved his goal. Next, he had to think about how to leave this place. Death was the way for him to leave this place. Others only knew that he was immortal in the chessboard because he had the mother's corpse. The chessboard of heaven and earth would always allow him to be reborn. This kind of rebirth wasn't a true rebirth, but it was a rebirth that allowed the user to bear the power of the attacks he received, and then reconstruct another version of himself in the chessboard. However, what others didn't know was that since he was in the upper realm of Zhou Xian, he was also within the perception of the chessboard of heaven and earth. He still had a chance to be reborn, and he would still be reborn in the chessboard of heaven and earth. Then, he would be kicked out of the chessboard and returned to outer space. It would be a perfect experience. The most satisfying thing was that the swordsman could only watch from the side as he completed his mission. There was one thing that the swordsman was right about. In view of their level, they just had to be themselves. Everything else shouldn't be within their scope of consideration. He could faintly feel that this journey to the core of Zhou Xian wasn't all about the chessboard of heaven and earth. It was related to the swordsman as well. Although he didn't know what he should do, he could still say something that sounded right but was actually wrong. Let me become a Buddha. Buddha is also Tao, and Tao is also Buddha. All living things are equal. Why should I choose? As he spoke, he revealed his golden body and calmly waited for his death. He looked at Lu Xiaoyi with great interest. He wanted to see the swordsman's final confusion. His final wish was a thought that came from his perception before his death. It came out of nowhere and it wasn't offensive. Its only purpose was the chessboard of heaven and earth didn't do anything to him. This was his own decision. Carrying the Buddhist thought of the eminent monk still had some side effects on him, so he might as well borrow the power of the chessboard of heaven and earth to start anew. Just as his Buddhist power began to dissipate and his life began to slide irreversibly towards death, Lu Xiaoyi softly uttered a strange sentence. The chessboard of heaven and earth. The rules of heaven and earth. Mu Yahu, why aren't you waking up? Minghui was a little confused. He didn't understand what the swordsman meant by that sentence. He only felt a little uneasy in his heart. However, this uneasiness quickly spread. He had been reborn once in the chessboard of heaven and earth to get used to the feeling of being reborn. However, this rebirth didn't seem right. There wasn't another restart point for life, and there wasn't any spatial transfer of life force. It was just a path towards death. The chessboard of heaven and earth didn't respond. He looked at the swordsman. The swordsman was also looking at him quietly. I didn't kill you in the chessboard because I was curious. I didn't kill you in the earth pulp because you were doing what you should do. I'm killing you now because you're no longer pure. You want to push me into the heart demon realm? You're thinking too much. Woodfix is the nickname of the chessboard of heaven and earth. I awakened it just to let it know who I am. My impartial instinct. What other Buddhist wishes do you have? Why don't you use this last chance to tell me? Minghui was running out of time. He couldn't understand why the swordsman would still kill him when he knew that there was no point in killing him. He would never know because he didn't understand the swordsman. Chapter 1450. He had an inner demon. It was normal for a cultivator to have an inner demon. It could be light or heavy, early or late. In some cases, it would pass without them noticing and fade away as they adjusted their cultivation direction. In some cases, it could be serious enough to destroy one's cultivation path and heart. Lu Xiaoyi's 1,000 years of cultivation could be said to be smooth sailing. Along the way, he had encountered many dangers, but he had never messed up his direction. He always knew what to do at the right time, which made his cultivation uninterrupted. But now, he finally felt that there was a problem with him. His inner demon had actually started at the Qing Kong exile grounds. It started from when he imagined himself as the savior of the 5 rings. Slowly, bit by bit, it sprouted and slowly changed his mentality. He was still a qualified swordsman, but this was only for ordinary people. If he wanted to carve out his own path, his current situation was actually very unsuitable. Saving the universe, saving the 5 rings, saving the sword vein, leading the army alone, going to the rescue alone, rebelling against Zhou Xian. He did a lot, but he also lost a lot. What he lost was not something tangible, but the impact was even greater. He was deviating from the nature of a swordsman. Swordsmen should be lonely, and simple. This was the cornerstone of their strength. Everything was done with the sword. But now, he was used to piling up a group of friends to do the talking. He was used to all kinds of calculations and strategies. He was used to scheming. It was shown in all kinds of hesitation, guesses, and doubts during the mission of the heavenly eyes. This should not be the attitude of a swordsman. Although in reality, he did not make a big mistake this time. If he continued like this, sooner or later, he would make a mistake that he could not undo. He had too much contact with people, but too little contact with nature. This was the root of the problem. In Zhou Xian, he and Qing Xian had already vaguely felt that something was wrong, so the two of them started to keep a low profile. But this was not enough. This was the reason why Minghui thought that he had found an opportunity. That was why he said those words at the end to make him doubt heavenly eyes. Doubt the battle between Taoism and Buddhism. In the end, he even made a Buddhist vow that was neither painful nor itchy. It was not for the purpose of killing, but to confuse people's minds. This was like drawing legs on a snake. Fortunately, Lu Xiaoyi still maintained the agility of a swordsman. He decisively killed the enemy and cut off his own path of retreat. Minghui should also be from heaven's eyes. Murder. Severing thoughts. As for the reaction of the heavenly eyes, there was no need to consider it. The problem now was how to get out of here. He had done all of this in the remnant will of the Tao of Destiny. If the remnant will of the Tao of Destiny really existed, how would they treat him? Forget it. A swordsman shouldn't have thought so much. He began to slowly retreat. He was prepared to be crushed to pieces at any time. He did not hope that the so-called Grandpa Fate would enlighten him. He did not need anyone to guide him. In fact, after he had reconstructed his body through the small universe, there was no one else who could guide him on this path. This was a narrow escape. This was because he had staged a massacre between Taoism and Buddhism in the remnant will of the Tao of Destiny. Moreover, it was a massacre without much reason. For such a remnant will, as long as it slightly changed its likes and dislikes, he would be crushed to pieces under the powerful pressure of the Earth's core. In order to get rid of his inner demon, he had to kill Minghui. Minghui might not be the instigator, but he had to make his stand clear. However, if he made his stand clear, he might offend the remnant will of the Tao of Destiny. Therefore, he did not avoid this. This was the most difficult retreat Lu Xiaoyi had ever made in his life. This was because he was facing an unprecedentedly powerful existence. He did not even know where the other party was. He only knew that in front of such an existence, he was not even an ant. However, he had to do this if he wanted to get out of his encirclement. Lu Xiaoyi was retreating with difficulty. However, he did not know that in heaven's eyes, there was a battle that revolved around him that he did not know. The true Buddha of Buddhism. Mission failed. You should be punished. He was the one who sent Lu Xiaoyi's mission. Don't be surprised why the true Buddha of Tian Mo wanted to stop his true Buddha from performing his true Buddha's Buddhist vow. Just based on the Buddhist vow of the fusion of Taoism and Buddhism, there would be great resistance in traditional Buddhism. More Buddhist Vedanta were against this. Therefore, it was natural for him to send a Taoist swordsman to stop the scum of his Buddhist sect. The true immortal of Taoism. You should be punished for killing your comrades. He was the one who sent Minghui's mission to disrupt the internal affairs of Buddhism. No fortress could be so strong that it could not be destroyed from the inside. Logically speaking, the swordsman's method should be very suitable for him, allowing Minghui to complete his Buddha's wish before making a move. However, the problem was that this swordsman's orthodoxy made him feel uneasy. Therefore, he did not mind giving a warning within the rules. Heaven's eyes had 4 hosts. 2 were humans, 1 was a spiritual treasure, and 1 was an immemorial divine beast. The rules should be followed by all 4 of them. In most cases, spiritual treasures and immemorial divine beasts would not participate in the internal strife of humans unless it involved their own clans. Therefore, their decision was basically the final one. However, they still had to ask for the opinions of their comrades out of courtesy. In his impression, the spiritual treasure and divine beast would only reply with a grunt and a grunt, indicating that they understood and could do whatever they wanted. However, this time, for the first time, Lord's spiritual treasure had a reaction. Objection. You big shots are despicable, yet you want to blame the Heaven's Eyes disciples below you? What is the right thing for him to do? You are not satisfied no matter what he does. Just because you did not achieve your desired goal. The universe has changed greatly, the heavenly Tao has collapsed, morality has fallen, and the rules have been corrupted. Heaven's Eyes is the only eye of righteousness, but the rules of 1,000,000 years have been trampled on by you all. In the long run, what is the point of Heaven's Eyes? Let's just break up. The immemorial beast god was even more direct. Objection. This child is fated with my immemorial clan. Whoever vents their personal anger on him is making things difficult for the beast god. Lord's spiritual treasure and the immemorial beast god's objection was beyond the expectations of the 2 human true immortals. It was a clear-cut objection that left no room for discussion. At their level, speaking in such a direct tone meant that their attitude was firm. 2 against 2 was just a draw. However, when it came to the two human true immortals, they had to give in. Because spiritual treasure had not affected their decisions for many years and had never interfered with their handling of human affairs. This was their face. They had given you face for millions of years. Now that they had opened their mouths, how could they not return the favor? The true Buddha smiled. Since the two of you insist, this Buddha takes back my opinion. The true immortal sneered. We are all on the same side. If the two of you had said so earlier, why did we have to make things difficult for him? Making us estranged? Chapter 1451. Lu Xiaoyi was still retreating. It took him a day to enter, and now he had retreated for 2 hours. Although he was still far from the earth pulp, he knew that the most dangerous time had passed. The fate source hadn't changed its attitude yet, which meant that it wouldn't change its attitude. He could still feel the kindness that surrounded him, just like when he had entered the room. This was also something that he had always been baffled by. Why was he so fortunate to receive such kindness in this place? Minghui was able to enter the core because he had the Buddha's wish to open the way. What did he have? At most, he could only borrow some light. Now it seemed that he wasn't able to enter because of the monk's Buddha's light, but because of his own good fortune. A place that was inexplicably dangerous for the sun god was like walking on flat ground for him. It was too strange. He was already used to it. The Heaven's Eyes mission this time allowed him to come into contact with a level that he didn't even dare to think about before. He really didn't know what he was thinking at that time, trying to take advantage of the situation and pass off the fish eyes as pearls. Was this a level he could casually step into? Just based on his strength? These brothers? It was too ridiculous. With a decision in his heart, he relaxed and no longer cared about the possible punishment from the Heavenly Eyes or any other responsibilities. He was already shouldering too much. He had carried Xianyuan, Xiaoyao, Qingkong, and now Zhou Xian. Would he have to carry the entire universe in the future? CK his grandpa. Do whatever he wants. Would Zhou Xian fall without him? Not necessarily. Even if Lu Xiaoyi and Qing Xian didn't stand up for him, there would still be others who would stand up for them. For example, the leader of the revolution by Mei Xianxian, or the outstanding talents who emerged from the various battlefields on the chessboard. There was Yuanying perfected cultivators, and those leaders from the small sects of Little Lu. There were many talents in the universe, each leading the way for hundreds of years. This wasn't Lu Xiaoyi's era, but everyone's era. The 36 innate great Daos weren't prepared for him alone. There would never be only one sword vein in the universe's cultivation world. Why was he so anxious? He had dug this hole for himself, starting from the blue sky exile grounds. Now he was ready to abandon it. The birth of an inner demon was a gradual process. It grew stronger step by step, unknowingly. Unlocking the inner demons was also a gradual process. Ever since the 5th ring, he did not bring his brothers back. It was this kind of subconscious that controlled him. When he came to Zhou Xian, he kept a low profile. Qing Xian was actually the same as him. They both faintly realized something, but the two of them were just not sure. The Heavenly Eye mission this time finally let him see an unfamiliar version of himself. He had become someone he didn't like. How was he enlightened? How was that possible? Killing and severing one's own path of retreat, this was what a true pawn should do. A day later, he left the core and entered the pulp of the earth. His speed suddenly increased. He had already gotten used to traveling through the core of the earth. Although he didn't communicate with the origin of destiny during the entire process, he was still very grateful. Along the way, there were many obstacles and enemies, but there were also many friends and kindness. He should be content. Qing Xian was still busy arranging the personnel for the next game. The opponent for the next game was the Heaven's Choice Daoist, so certain adjustments had to be made. As the actual controller of several consecutive battles in the demonic realm, he was given a heavy responsibility. His sect, Taishian Zhonghuang, supported him wholeheartedly. Xiaoyao Yu also saw him as one of his own because of their close relationship. Even Qingwei Immortal Sect and Yuanshi Ascetic Zen treated him as a core member. For these two former spies, they should be content. But for some reason, he felt a little annoyed, but he didn't know where the annoyance came from. Was it because that guy wasn't by his side? That didn't seem to be the case. Those words he said to Kawa weren't nonsense. He really felt that even without the two of them, Zhou Xian would still be able to persevere. In fact, when the people of Zhou Xian decided to give their all in the fifth game, everything was already decided. When he was free, he would find a random peak in Xiaoyao Mountain and sit there silently. Like Lu Xiaoyi, he recalled the gains and losses of the past 700 years. But it was almost the same process, but he got almost a completely different answer. Lu Xiaoyi was wrong. A swordsman should be alone and live his life with a sword. Similarly, he was wrong. Daoist sects like the Three Pristines should command the world and lead the crowd. Lu Xiaoyi was wrong for not keeping a low profile, but he was wrong for not keeping a low profile. What was his purpose for coming here? Was it to be unknown? Or to spread the light of the Three Pristines here? Little Miao, if one day both of us are no longer here and have gone to find our own path, what will you do? Little Miao seemed to have known that this day would come. Cats were not dogs. They were born with a kind of pride and independence, but they wouldn't always follow behind their owners. There are many places you can go, right? You can go back to Miao Star to take a look. You can go and chat with a big tree. You can go to Tianju to play with the ancient beasts. You can also stay in Zhou Xian. Little Miao has made many friends here. But you won't be lonely. Senior brother, I understand. It's because of the two of you that a window was opened for Little Miao, allowing me to have the fortune to see how wonderful the outside world is. These wonderful things are enough for Little Miao to see for many, many years. Until one day, Little Miao understands. Senior brother will come back once in a while, right? Then bring Little Miao to see more wonderful worlds. Senior brother Qing Xian, I can wait. You must know that the lifespan of demonic beasts is much, much longer than that of humans. Qing Xian laughed involuntarily. You think too simply. You also understand. That's right, there will definitely be a day when we meet again. No matter which one of us, we will help you open another window. As long as you live long enough, there will be countless windows waiting for you. Little Miao asked softly, Senior brother Qing Xian, is Senior brother Xiaoyi not coming back? Qing Xian didn't answer, only looking into the distance. There was a sword shadow rushing from afar, but because it was too far away, it couldn't reach Xiaoyao Mountain. Only the sound of the sword was melodious, as if it was saying goodbye and saying something. After listening carefully for a long time, he sighed. Yes, that irresponsible guy has found his own path. I'm afraid he won't be coming back. Little Miao asked, going to a place very far away? Qing Xian snorted. I don't know. You can prepare a coffin for him, or at least a coffin for him to wear clothes. After being together for so long, Little Miao finally understood that the way they talked to each other couldn't be understood literally. It was completely opposite. Senior brother Qing Xian is leaving too. Qing Xian shook his head, his gaze firm.
No.
I'm not leaving. Little Miao, go and tell them that I've officially agreed to their request to take over the position of host of Zhou Xian's chessboard demonic realm. In addition, I want them to announce this news in front of all the cultivators in Zhou Xian. Tell them to make it clear that I'm Qing Xian, a member of the Three Pure Ones. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.